You're listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
All right, everybody, welcome back into the show. I'm your host, James Payne, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Dalton Gray.
Hello.
And Mariah Humphreys.
Hi.
Hi. All right, so we are doing what is now, I guess, the third installment of How to Hunt Alaska. And this one's going to be specifically about bears. We didn't end up getting to that one last time. And method of take. That's a very important part of the regs that a lot of people tend to skip over.
Yes.
So we're going to dive into that a little bit just so help you guys stay out of trouble. And I really wanted to pose a question to our listeners. If you are enjoying this, we early on in the development process, I guess you could say, for this show, we had a somewhat interesting debate on whether we should do any kind of series or any kind of back-to-back episodes like this. And this one actually wasn't even intended to be that.
No,
it just kind of ended up being so much information we couldn't squish it into even two.
James, there's part of me that really didn't want to do it, but...
Right. But it is important information.
Yep,
and so
it is.
there's, so what my question is, and you can contact us on the website, would be, do you like these styles? Would you like more specific series, maybe about a certain kind of hunt or something like that? And, or if you don't like it, you can let us know. So hit us up on the website. It's at thenorthernhunter.com. They have a contact button there. You can send us an email at info@thenorthernhunter. Or you can go to the Instagram page or the Facebook page and let us know what your thoughts are. So, well, before we dive into this version of it, I think Mo has a very interesting story he wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I noticed this last week. I don't remember when, but I noticed this.
It's been circulating for a little bit now. But.
Yeah, I think I noticed this. Well, I guess for when they're listening, it'll have been like just over a week ago when I saw this. But I'll just read the headline. But it's from KTOO. We get a lot of information from them. But
love
says,
those guys.
On a tiny southeast Alaska island, wolves are eating sea otters like popcorn. Which that headline caught my attention.
That's a very interesting analogy there, like popcorn.
And I was interested. I was like, well, that must not happen with the way that headline sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And, I read the article. I'm not going to read too much of it now, but it's...
So what's the gist of what's happening there?
Yeah. As I was going to say, the gist of what's happening is there's a pack of wolves that was...
Hold on a second. Is it wolves or wolves?
I said,
I'm getting kind of a different pronunciation here.
Oh, boy.
So are you picking fun of my Midwest accent?
It's no. I'm talking about Mariah here.
Yeah.
His North Polian accent. So it's not wolves, it's wolves. Anyway, sorry.
I think it's wolves.
A pack of woofs.
I apologize. And for all of those who it's probably driven crazy whenever I've said wolves or wolves or something weird, I'll try to fix that. All right. There is so it started out, this is in Unit 1. There's a small island just off of another bigger island.
I think it's down by the Alaska Peninsula, if I remember right.
No.
Is it
Alaska
southeast?
Peninsula
This is
west.
southeast. Yeah, that's Unit 1, James. Yeah.
I'm actually going to look up this island as we go.
I was reading the article before.
Okay. Anyway, so it's on an island called Pleasant Island. It says...
Sounds like a very nice place.
It does. Probably wouldn't be if we went there. I have to rename it.
Pleasant Island.
Anyway, there was... it was an island. It was populated with deer. A lot of the locals that lived in a village or a town nearby would go hunt quite often, and they'd kind of hunt deer on it. And it's only like 20 square miles. Anyway, at some point, I think one of the locals, and I may have this wrong because it's not completely clear in the article, but I believe one of the locals was a biologist who was also doing some of the hunting and stuff over there and maybe doing some fishing. And what they noticed was they saw a wolf or two that swam over. And they didn't, they started killing some of the deer, and it only took a few years, and they killed all the deer. And next thing, and it went in a very short amount of time. I think by 2015. So this is some time's elapsed, but this is just news coming out now. But I think by 2015 they were seeing like 13 wolves.
Yeah, that would make sense.
In a pack on a 20 square mile island.
So just as you're going here, I'm just going to add to this by saying Pleasant Island is 6 3/4 miles long and 4 miles wide.
Okay.
Pretty small place. Anyway,
Yeah.
Continue. 13 wolves in the pack.
13 wolves in the pack. And so, with all the deer gone, they expected the wolves to crash. I mean, that's what any of us would have, what a conclusion we would come to. Okay, they're going to kill all the deer. They're going to crash. They're going to die.
Probably turn on each other.
Or they're going to try to go back to the mainland where there's another pack of wolves that's going to kill them.
Yeah.
And but the wolves continued on healthy, and so they started taking stool samples from the wolves. And they've taken like thousands of stool samples at this point, I think.
Okay.
And running a genetic analysis on the stool samples to see what they've been eating. And when the first couple that they ran, they were really surprised that they found some sea otter, and they thought, well, this must just have been like one that washed up dead on the beach.
Some kind of anomaly.
Yeah. Because sea otters don't go to land, right?
Right. And then they're fairly formidable for their size.
Yes. And but they went and collected a whole bunch more samples and discovered that, I just realized something. I had something wrong. 2015, they counted 3 wolves. 2017, there were 13.
Wow.
Yeah, so 2 years,
That's
populated
a pretty big
quickly.
boom.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they collected a bunch of stool samples, looked at them, did all the analysis, however all that works, and discovered that they've been eating sea otters. That's their main course, their main diet, which makes sense because there's nothing else for them to eat.
Right.
Except that, they've never seen anything like this before. And now what they did say in the article was that, the sea otters were trapped out of Southeast almost completely in the by the early 1900s, mostly. But when with the Russians and the local natives would hunt and trap and sell them to the Russians, as the Russians would trap and kill all the rest that they could get. They were taking tens of thousands out a year of pelts, and anyway, they killed almost all of them. There weren't hardly any in the area. These ones were actually reintroduced.
Okay.
So they said what they did say is this could have been something that happened before that. Anyway, so my questions about this, because that's kind of the gist of what's happening. And they mention how sea otters are very ferocious little guys. They've got very sharp teeth, sharp claws. Yeah. I mean, they dive down, pick up crustaceans or fish, whatever they can catch. They bring it up and they eat it. In shallow water, but they don't go to land. At least that's what everything I've read says.
Right. Yeah.
Now we stopped on an island just to take a break when we were hunting in Southeast, and there was a very small island. It was a few 100 yards or 2 long, maybe by less wide.
Right.
And there's kind of a little rocky point in the middle, and there was some brush and some trees. And James, I think you and I both at different times kind of wandered up in different parts of it. It kind of wanders up to this cool little point, and there's some Devil's Club on it, and like a little its own little ecosystem there. But I found there was very distinct evidence of of critters being on, not deer, but of critters being on this very small island and eating fish.
There was almost like a little, if I remember right, there was almost like a little cave that went through that section there. And
there was lots of evidence of fish and crustaceans having been eaten there. The bones and the shells all up and down in little spots. And, that wasn't anything else that I know of but a sea otter.
Could have been a river otter.
Perhaps.
That's
just a question I have. If somebody who's just listening who knows the answers to these questions.
Yeah.
But, so the wolves are either swimming out to shallow water to kill these sea otters, which I don't see happening. Wolves don't like water.
Right.
Yeah.
Them getting on the island to begin with is a major feat for wolves.
Yeah.
But they say maybe this is a weak group of sea otters that is going to land to eat. You'd think they'd learn pretty quickly not to.
Yeah. I had read one article pertaining to this last week, and it had pointed out that from what they thought the wolves were doing was trapping them at low tide. And so kind of waiting until there wasn't a whole lot of, water close, or the wolves could get farther out, and then able to actually basically maneuver around them and surround them. And,
that's a good point.
Would you call that dog paddling?
So a thought I had with this was when, low tide, there's a lot of areas that are very shallow, right? I mean, that at high tide can be, there can be 10 feet of water on them. And so if the sea otters are in a somewhat shallow location when they eat,
Right.
Yeah.
and if they just kind of hang out there while they eat, while the tide goes out, you know, if the wolves are sitting there, you know, who knows, maybe sitting in the trees,
Yeah.
and they just run out there, and you know, the sea otters don't have time to
wolves
respond.
are ridiculously smart creatures.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me if they'd come up with something like that.
Yeah.
But, and for those wondering how, or I guess why these wolves ended up on the island, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon with wolf social structures. So they'll actually, the way new packs are created is they will kick out unruly wolves.
Mm.
So when I was down in Yellowstone earlier this year, I was able to actually sit and glass some wolves with a fellow named Rick McIntyre. He's kind of a wolf expert, and he's got, I think, 5 different books out all about wolves and you know, their social interactions and everything like that. And it was really cool actually getting to sit there, and we're both on our spotting scopes, and I'm kind of guiding him into wolves and he's guiding me into wolves, and we got chatting about one group we were actually watching was a lone female that had just found a new mate. And that's what they're expecting happened here, is that there was a mainland pack that kicked a female or a male. They didn't specify. But anyway, the wolves are so territorial that she then had to get out of their entire territory. I mean, wolves can have hundreds and hundreds of square miles
And the
of
alternative
territory.
is they'll kill it.
Right. They will kill it.
Right.
And so basically you're witnessing the creation of a whole new pack here. At some
Right.
point, 2 different wolves of 2 different sexes got booted from packs and then ended up on this island. But that is a phenomenal growth. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking, what? So they said in 15 there were 3.
Yeah.
A year later there was 10.
Yeah.
And by 2017 there were 13 wolves. That is a huge
Right.
blow up in the population.
Right.
I mean, even for 3 wolves, that's not even 2 breeding pairs,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So, I mean, there must be more and more coming from the mainland.
Yeah.
It would be my only thought there.
Yeah.
Now, do we know previously if there were any other predators on the island? Like
I don't believe there were.
black bear or anything
Nothing like that at all.
Nothing? No.
Well,
Huh.
so Pleasant Island is right off the coast from Gustavus, which is a small village down there.
Yep.
I would imagine there are probably bears that are on Pleasant Island,
Okay.
but you know, it didn't necessarily specify in the article.
Yeah.
but,
I
you
hadn't
know.
seen anything in any of them.
I read multiple
Readings I've
articles,
done.
and I didn't see anything referenced about any other animals on the island,
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, man,
or
that's,
any other large.
and they
critter.
eliminated the entire deer population.
Yeah,
huh?
I mean, it doesn't take much for wolves to do something like that.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, bears do kill a lot of deer. Well, black bears do. Brown bears not quite so much. I mean, I think they'll do it. It's more just an opportunistic thing. But the
Yeah.
brown bears are more focused on fish and sea life and whatnot.
Right.
And you know, and not to say that the black bears aren't in those coastal areas, but the black bears do kill more deer than the brown bears do by far.
Mhm.
Especially like around Prince of Wales Island and that type of area is more what I'm familiar with black bears killing deer. So from what I know, if there were black bears there, then I'm sure they would have contributed to killing deer.
Yeah.
But that being said, wolves are a whole lot more focused on killing deer
Man.
than the bears would be.
Well, I haven't read anything in my searchings about this event going on down there about any effort to control the wolf population.
Mm-hmm.
But
just
if
studying
you
it, yeah.
if you work for the state and any game management group and you need some help with controlling this population, I think I know 3 guys that would love to come down there and give you a hand with that. So
Yeah.
give us a
13.
call. We'll buy plane tickets tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like an interesting
Hope it-
situation.
Seems like it'd be a pretty fun
I'd
hunt. Yeah.
be curious to see what they do about this if they try to extirpate the wolves. Or,
It'd
you
be
know.
interesting. I know they've done that on other islands when they've
Yeah.
had issues with predator,
Right.
overpredation on
Yeah.
an island system like
Right.
that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
keep an eye on this. I mean, you said this was on KTOO. Yeah. Yep. So, and I know there's a lot of people that have been covering it. So,
I would be interested to know, just from a genetic standpoint, if the wolves historically ever did target sea otters. Because I can't imagine that this is the only place on the coast that wolves are killing sea otters.
This is the
I-
first time they've seen it
I think,
in any kind of recent history.
Okay,
That's where
but
it's been mentioned.
not ruled out that any other pack is doing it.
It's ruled out that any other pack is doing it now. What is ruled out is that it happened in the past.
Okay.
That it didn't happen in the past is not ruled out.
Right. So in the past is not ruled out, but they're not monitoring every single wolf pack and watching every, pile of scat looking for
That's
sea
true,
otter,
yeah.
I agree, but with the amount of
remnants.
I would think if it is happening, it would be very rare.
Right, exactly.
It would be,
so my point about this is if wolves know that it's an easy target every once in a while, even if they're not doing it a lot, then this pack figured out, yep, this is a really good way of getting food. This is pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that the sea otters in this area were reintroduced. That would be something that I'd be interested to hear about. If they brought in sea otters from a different part of Alaska, and how their historic defense is wired, but I know that's kind of dumbing it down a little bit, but historically speaking, if these otters have never in their history experienced being hunted by wolves, if they lived somewhere else where wolves don't, then they don't understand what the threat is.
Yep.
And then basically you're learning from your buddies and your other members of the group getting eaten by these wolves instead of it being instinctually wired into
essentially
their brains.
To them, it's the first time this has ever happened.
Exactly. Exactly. But to the wolves in this area, they might have had the back of their mind knowledge, if you will. Hey, this worked. For grandpa.
Starvation food.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
it wouldn't have been grandpa. I mean, we're talking, it would have been 100 years ago.
Well, he's talking even if it happens outside
instinctual.
of humans
But
knowing it.
It's instinctual.
Like they go after deer mostly, but let's say if the opportunity strikes, they would take an otter.
Right.
So
I don't
it's
think
more
the
of a,
opportunity. See, I don't believe that sea otters are an easy prey for a wolf. Period.
Right.
It's
Right.
their only option here, so they've learned to do it.
They just adapt.
So I don't. Sure, it may have happened randomly, but it's more likely that one may have been eaten. But I think sure, there may be some genetic information from 100 years ago.
I'm interested enough in this. We should try to reach out to somebody and see if we can bring them on to talk about it. Because this sounds. I mean, you could easily make a whole show about this. So that'd be something I'd be interested in seeing.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Well, anyway,
so let's get into the bulk of this here episode. We are going to be talking about bears. So this is something that we all are. You could almost say obsessed with hunting. I mean, the three of us. There's just a special something about hunting bears in Alaska. They're just a fascinating creature. I can easily, without a doubt, say that the black bear in particular, just due to its behavioral patterns and everything, is probably my favorite animal on the planet. I mean, they're just fascinating creatures to watch, and that's half the reason I like baiting is just you get all those videos of just the crazy things they do, and you create these puzzles for them to solve. But so that's kind of what this is going to be about. We covered moose, caribou, sheep, goat, and whatnot in the last one. So if you missed that, go back and check out that episode if that's what you're targeting. But if you're going after bear, hang in for this one. It's going to be a good
finish this
time.
one, learn about bear, then go back and listen to that one. Yeah.
But so Dalton, you've been hunting bear around here for a long time. So why don't you go over the 3 hunt opportunities you'd be able to get for bear?
So I know that in our last episode we kind of broke things down for species specific things as far as legalities. With bears, generally speaking, with black bears, it's not a gender-specific hunt. It is just 1 black bear or 3 black bears or 5 black bears, depending on your unit. And this is obviously talking in terms of Alaska residents. Yep. So most non-residents, I'm sure that in a lot of areas in the interior, you can get multiple black bear permits or harvest tickets for non-residents. But there are areas on the coast of Alaska that have registration permit black bear hunts. Yep. Like, for instance, down in Prince William Sound. It's a registration permit. And so, for instance, you could encounter a situation like this. So we as residents get 5 black bear tags per year because in a couple of units, I know in 25C, you can shoot 5 black bears per year. In 20B, where we live, you can shoot 3. Okay. Now, when we get 5 black bear tags, if we want to go down to Prince William Sound, let's just say for a registration permit hunt,
Yep.
that is one black bear on that harvest ticket, on that registration permit. Okay. So how this works is if you shoot a black bear in the interior on a harvest ticket, and then you want to go down to the coast and shoot one on a registration permit, you cannot do that on the same calendar hunting year.
Now,
If you go and shoot a black bear on a registration permit first,
yeah.
then you can come back and add more to your harvest tickets.
So wait a minute.
You know, oh, go ahead.
You can't shoot, say, 3 black bears in a 5-bear area, and then go shoot one.
Not on the registration permit.
So
Really?
Yeah. So like how in Toke you can shoot 2 brown bear or 2 grizzlies.
Yeah.
If you go down there and you shoot a grizzly, and you come back to the Fairbanks area, let's say you go up to like the up off the Steese in the 40-mile country, and you happen to see a grizzly up there, can't take it.
Okay, well that makes sense because that's a 1-bear area.
Right, and that's the same with registration hunts of any species in the state. So if your caribou hunt, if you take one off the 40-mile country, that's a registration hunt, but that'll still count against your 5 tags you could otherwise use up off the Dalton Highway.
Right.
So all over the state, what he's saying is applicable. So
right. So anyway, most of the black bear hunts for us as residents, like I said, unless you're down on the coast somewhere that has a registration permit, most of our interior black bear hunts that I'm aware of are harvest ticket opportunities. Grizzly bears are much the same in the interior. In a lot of areas, you don't even need any kind of a locking tag. There are locking tag areas in the interior that you need as a resident, but most grizzly hunts, you don't even, there's not a tag for it.
Yeah.
You just need to have your hunting license. And the way that they keep track of it is you have to get it sealed within 30 days of the kill.
Now, for non-residents, they actually do need a harvest, or they need their
need a
license
locking
and
tag.
a locking tag for both black and grizzly bear.
Correct.
So,
yeah. So, and anyway, and then brown bears live on the coast. Basically, the difference between a brown bear and a grizzly bear. I know in the regs it says brown/grizzly bear and for a lot of these. That's kind of a subjective thing. Personally, I think if a brown or grizzly bear is eating fish as a main part of its diet and it sleeps for 3 months or less, then I count that as a brown bear because it's likely going to be a lot bigger than most of the interior grizzly bears.
Yep.
That being said, there are a lot of big grizzly bears in the interior that you can see up over 8 feet. They're not as common necessarily. Well, not necessarily. They are not generally as big as brown bears are, and that has a lot to do with their diet and their food supply and how long they sleep in the den for. Interior grizzly bears generally, a good mature interior grizzly bear is going to be 7.5 foot. On the upper end, it'll be 8 foot, maybe or more.
Now, don't quote me on this because I'm not looking at the regs right now, but I want to say that they document the difference between brown and grizzly as being within 100 miles from the coast. Is that? I want to say that's how they break it down.
Yeah, Boone and Crockett, I believe. Boone and Crockett and SCI categorize them differently. One of them says that at the 62nd parallel and south, they're brown bears.
Okay.
And anything north of that, it's a grizzly bear. The other one says within 50 miles of the coast.
Okay.
So that I think is... Yeah, I can shoot holes in both of those theories, and I'm not going to go into all that. I severely disagree with that in a lot of ways. I think that it's very situational because there are interior rivers in some of the mountain ranges in South Central that get runs of salmon that these grizzly bears technically are eating.
Yep.
They're farther away than 50 miles from a coast.
And I think that's why the state made it a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Of a berth there because it's like you said. I mean, those runs go strong all the way up those rivers. So
So anyway, that the brown bear hunting opportunities are a lot different. I'm not aware of anywhere that you can shoot more than one brown bear a year.
Yeah.
At least as far as I know. And I don't hunt in every game management unit, so I don't read the regs for areas that I don't hunt necessarily.
Yep.
Most areas are a registration permit or even a draw permit for brown bears.
Yep.
They're a little bit more tightly regulated, and that's for trophy value. Brown bears garner a lot of attention because, they're big.
They're huge.
They're nice trophy class animals for non-residents to come up and shoot.
The biggest land predator in North America, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's the largest carnivore in North America.
Yeah.
So anyway, that being said, that the brown bears, just to give an idea, I said grizzlies, a nice mature boar will be 7.5 foot average. The nice mature brown bear in a good trophy class area will be 9.5 foot or bigger.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, on a guided hunt, guides are looking for 9.5 foot plus bears. Some areas 9 foot is considered just fine. Some areas 8.5 foot to 9. Southeast Alaska, Unit 4, Unit 1, that part of the state, a brown bear is considered plenty big enough at 8.5 foot.
Yep.
They don't tend to get that much bigger than that in most of Southeast.
That's just like regional genetics, right?
Right, exactly. And colorations will vary quite a bit with brown bears anyway. Kodiak, Kodiak has had the most attention just because of all the guiding through the years. I know I mentioned in a previous episode about Pinnell and Talifson. There's a book about them, The Last of the Great Brown Bear Men, and they sort of did their part, a large part of advertising and commercializing guided brown bear hunts on Kodiak back in the 50s and so on. So that being said, the brown bear industry is booming and it has always been more desirable for non-resident hunters to come up and shoot brown bears just because of their extreme size.
Yeah.
I always tell clients, if they ask me, how come you're obsessed with bears so much? And I always answer it the same way, because we don't have lions.
Right.
If I had something more dangerous to hunt, I would hunt it. I just think that dangerous game hunting is a blast.
Yep.
Brown bears require a lot of gun to kill. We talked about that in the previous episode as well. I like big guns and I like big bears. I cannot lie. So at any rate, on Kodiak, you're generally going to see that trophy class held to a pretty high standard because the guides on Kodiak are managing for extreme upper class size bears.
And those bears have been isolated for so long that the genetics for that is just more prominent.
The genetic isolation on Kodiak is very, very good. And even on Kodiak, it would be more common for a 9 or a 9.5 foot squared size bear to have potentially a Boone and Crockett skull size just because of the good genetics.
Yep.
And in a lot of other parts of the state, a 9 or 9.5 foot bear might not have a Boone and Crockett size head, even if it's, obviously a 9 and 9.5 foot bear is a good bear, but in other parts of the state, to generally get that trophy class skull size, you're going to have to pick for 9.5 plus.
Yep.
That's just the way the genetics are. And, Kodiak, I have seen a lot of dark bears come off of Kodiak too, but I seem to see it not necessarily more prevalently blonde and lighter color bears on Kodiak, but more than other parts of the state.
Okay.
It's just a coloration thing. And I'm not saying that there aren't dark bears on Kodiak, and I'm sure people will text me with dark bear pictures from Kodiak. I understand that they're there, but I just seem to see more photos of big, giant 10-foot plus boars that are lighter colored. And those exist in other parts of the state as well, but they seem to be more common in that part of the state.
And all over the state, wherever you go in these, Alaska is such a massive state. There's going to be broken down into certain ecosystems where they might, thrive in one area.
Right.
And then this group of bears is more just kind of sticks in this area.
Right.
And so you're going to see everything from a brown bear or a grizzly that looks pert near black to a very blonde one to a toklot, which is an awesome color.
Which is like a blonde top and a black legs
and
type
very
thing.
dark legs with a mane. It's such a pretty bear.
The brown bear that I shot in Southeast in 2017 was pretty near black. But I have yet to see a blonde colored brown bear or even a light brown bear in Southeast down in that unit where I hunt. Every brown bear I've ever seen down there is dark, pushing black. It's just how they are.
And black bears have even more crazy differences because
color
you'll
phases.
see, just in our area, you've got true black bears, you've got chocolates, you've got cinnamons.
Right.
You go down south and you can end up with blondes and the one I'd love to see someday, and I will, is a glacier black bear.
A blue bear.
That is my a top bucket list item for me. Is to find a glacier black bear.
That is That is the most rare color phase of a black bear, for sure.
Yep. And so it is really, they're fascinating creatures just from that standpoint alone, is that they can look so different in different regions. So,
and I think just to cap off the black, brown, and grizzly bear differentiation, you do have to have a guide as a non-resident to hunt brown or grizzly bear. So interior or coastal.
Do they count black bear in with that as well, or is that's
no? Black bear you can shoot as a DIY hunt as a non-resident, but for brown or grizzly bear you do have to have a guide.
Yep.
And so again, for a non-resident, that's an automatic locking tag, and I think for most residents as well, you have to have a locking tag to shoot a brown bear as well.
I've never heard of a hunt where you didn't.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
most grizzlies, you don't have to have a tag as a resident.
Right.
Yeah, you just take it down and get it sealed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But in a lot of units in the interior, though, even as a resident, you do also have to have a locking tag.
You do, yeah.
So.
Yeah, when we did our registration, when we were down in Southeast, Mo and I, we had to get locking tags for that. So, But yeah, so if you are a resident and you're hunting in the interior for, let's say, caribou or moose, and you happen to see a grizzly bear, and maybe you hadn't known ahead of time,
right?
Oh, snap, I don't have my tag. You don't need one.
Right.
Take it.
Just check to make sure you don't need a locking tag in there.
I mean, make sure, again, cycle back to the last two,
read
episodes and look at where you're at, look at the regs, make sure they're in season, make sure it's a bear you're allowed to shoot.
Right.
But if it's a legal bear, take it, skin it, bring the head and hide out and go get it sealed, and you're perfectly legal. So,
absolutely.
So those are the three bears that you can hunt here in Alaska. It would be the black, the coastal, and the interior grizzly bear.
Yep.
There are polar bears here in Alaska, for those that are wondering, but they are off the menu as far as hunting goes. They've been protected in this state for some time, and they're not even an option. So I believe you can hunt polar bears in Canada if you are accompanied by an indigenous guide.
But I don't think you can bring them back into the States now.
There has been, I've heard some horror stories as far as importation goes.
Back.
Yeah. So if you do want to hunt a polar bear, I'm sorry, you can't do it in America. And you might not even be able to bring your trophy back to America. So we're just going to completely skip over that species.
Just wait till the apocalypse happens. All right, folks, I want to take a second to tell you about a product I found this last year and have absolutely fallen in love with. It's the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. I used one on a recent black-tailed deer hunt in southeast Alaska, and it did a great job of keeping the saltwater and debris out of the action and also protecting the scope on my rifle from getting knocked around and damaged. On top of all that, the carry handle made it easy to transport the rifle to and from the boat during the hunt. When it got wet from rain and ocean spray, I hung it up at camp to dry at night, and it was always dry in 20 minutes or less. Stealthy Hunter also offers a wide variety of nutritional supplements for the outdoorsman, such as CBD oils, essential vitamins, turmeric, and bone broth. In the gear shop, they also have a lightweight first aid kit, glassing pads, and stuff sacks to organize your gear and your pack. Go check out Stealthy Hunter's website and use the code TheNorthernHunter at checkout to get a discount on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
Hey guys, if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you've likely heard Dalton and I go back and forth about bullet construction and how I like rapid expanding bonded core bullets that leave massive wound channels. I've also stated I would never use a monolithic bullet. Well, I'm here to tell you about the company that finally changed my mind. Hammer Bullets produces what I would consider the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are designed so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, the front half of the bullet explodes, shedding its petals and imparting massive damage to the vital areas while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration, effectively closing the gap between lead core and monolithic construction. The guys at Hammer designed these bullets with 100% focus on how they perform once they reach their destination. But don't let that fool you. These bullets have amazing VCs and have specialized pressure grooves built in for amazing inherent accuracy. They have a minimum velocity rating of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots but have no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity rounds like the Weatherby 3378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. They've also recently partnered with Weatherby to provide factory ammunition for a multitude of cartridges. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com to buy yours today and drop the hammer on your next adventure.
Everybody knows that one of the most important pieces of a hunter's kit is their knife. Whether you're looking for a fleshing blade, a skinning blade, or just a quality, multi-purpose knife for the backcountry, Yukon River Knives has what you need. They offer blades such as the Hunter, Small Game, and the Sendero Bush Knife. Yukon River Knives is based in Texas and has a unique mission goal in that a percentage of all knife sales go to support a missionary in Alaska. Now, Dalton, you've experience with these knives in the field. Talk to us about that.
As a matter of fact, I have used a few of their knives and watched my good friend Remy use them for years with great results. They have a micarta handle that doesn't get slippery when it gets wet, and they have phenomenal edge retention for long skinning jobs. Go check out our web link on thenorthernhunter.com, and that'll take you directly to Yukon River Knives website to see their full selection and order your knives for your next hunt with the discount code TheNorthernHunter at checkout. And remember, nothing replaces a quality hunting knife.
Now, Mo, you have been hunting bears since you were 7.
I have.
So why don't you take this next part away with the methods of hunting that we have offered to us in this amazing state?
All right. Well, my primary method I did growing up, and I've done quite a few others, but here and there. But growing up, I did a lot of bear baiting. At 7 years old, my dad hauled me into the bear bait stand, and
that's
so
Alaskans' favorite springtime.
Oh, yeah.
Springtime activity.
So break down to us in a short synopsis, what is bear baiting for those that don't know?
well, you get a bunch of real smelly, stinky. You get something for the bear to eat, and you spread it out. You find a spot that's a quarter mile from a road or a mile from any kind of dwelling or state recreational area. And you set up a stand or a blind. I haven't actually done a blind hunt. I've always been able to do it out of a stand in the areas I've been in.
Tree stand.
Tree stand, correct.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry about that. You throw out the bait and you throw out the and it's a springtime thing. Only in the spring it ends.
Right. Yep.
Ends in the end of June.
Some areas down in South Central, like down on Unit 16, you can bait in the fall.
I've seen that, but I've heard that it's not very productive in the fall.
Yeah, it's hit or miss because they have so many other food sources that time of year.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, no, you set up the bait, and you set up usually set up some game cameras.
Yep.
In the state, if you're coming up here to hunt, and if you've got a buddy with a black bear bait or something, and you're going to come up try to shoot one off of it, and you're like buying gear and you want to be all the help you can, that's great. But don't bring up a cell camera that sends pictures to your phone. That is illegal up here.
Right.
So that's been a topic of debate for a long time. I know that just last year they were trying to fight that because typically, I'll say this, from my understanding, they're not illegal. What they do is they follow the same rules as a fly-in hunt. So when you check it, you're not allowed to hunt till 3 a.m. the next day.
I've known guys get written up for it. So
I think that was one of the proposals, but I don't think they actually accepted
that. Did that not go through?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
because I know the other one was they were wondering why that's illegal anyways, because it's not like you can look at it at 2 p.m. while you're on your work shift.
Right.
Realize there's a bear there, load up your truck, haul out there, an hour out to your bait and expect that bear to still be there. So But yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Anyhow, yeah. I mean, and you set up some bait and you hope some bears start hitting it. You check it once a week until you got some bears on it. And once you start getting consistent bears hitting it, you get on a time and you go sit in the stand and hope something shows up.
Yep. And baiting bears for our Midwest or Eastern listeners that are used to baiting deer, it is not anything similar. There's a lot of technicality, a lot of science, a lot of understanding the animal you're going after, and we're going to do a whole lot of talking about that specifically in future episodes.
Similarity to that is
the fact that there's bait there.
There's bait, and you're sitting and waiting.
Yeah, basically.
Bears are a lot more forgiving most of the time when it comes to noise and scent, depending on your location. A lot of what it has your has to do with depending on where you're at and all that kind of stuff. But usually, if you if you need to scratch your nose when the bear's in, if you do it slow, you're usually fine. You can't do that with a whitetail.
Right, yeah. So that takes us from April 15th to June 30th. That is the season for baiting.
Yeah.
For black bears.
Now, depending on your region, you can actually bait for grizzlies or brown bears as well. But typically, that's one of those things you have to look at the regs because, like our region, we'll just talk about our home unit right now, 20B, you're allowed to shoot grizzlies over bait. But only until May, until the end of May. After that, anytime in June, they're off the menu.
Right.
So that kind of sucks because June's like the hot season. You know, that's when everything starts hitting. And so I've seen baits where, you know, that there's no grizzly at all, and then all of a sudden, right in June, it's nothing but grizzlies. And so, you know, there's other areas that you can shoot grizzlies all the way through the baiting season. Just again, look at your area, your specific region, and make sure that you're within the regs on that. But so that takes us through the spring. After that, if you were wanting to hunt, what would you use? Or what method would you use?
I'd say there's basically one primary for that, and that would be like a spot and stock style.
Right.
We've talked some about like the mountain hunting, and that would probably be the most productive that time of year.
Right.
Yep.
And that's where you pick a spot on the map, and ideally you've been there before. You know what you're doing. We talked a lot about like scouting out places before you're going to go on the hunt.
Right.
And this is a great time to do that. This is a great time to scout moose and sheep spots too.
Yeah.
Because you can go there looking for bears, depending on what's open. A lot of times, after baiting season, most grizzly bear hunts are closed, right?
They do have a weird. Now this is also depending on unit, and it changes.
Right.
It changes so
here,
much.
Grizzly's over before June. Right?
Yeah. And then I think it closes down till I want to say September.
September. Yeah. So like you can do moose hunting, but like black bears are always going to be open, in most of the state. Especially here. So if you go find a spot. You're scouting out a new moose spot or something. You're able to go look for moose sign, look for moose, look at moose, and also keep an eye out for black bears.
Yep. Because if you happen to see a black bear while you're scouting for moose in July,
absolutely,
then you can take it legally. At least in the section of the state we're in. I mean, obviously. Check your regs.
A lot of areas too. Grizzlies,
liability.
Grizzlies will open up sometime in August in a lot of units too. So if you are sheep hunting, you can, coincidentally take a grizzly. Obviously, speaking as a resident, you're allowed to shoot a grizzly on. If you're out sheep hunting in August, sheep season opens August 10th in Alaska, and so. If you're on that sheep hunt and you see a grizzly bear and it's open in that unit, then spot and stalking that time of year. The grizzlies are going to be on blueberries for the most of the state, at least in the interior, and you can have a pretty decent chance of seeing a grizzly up in a berry patch and shoot them that way too.
Right.
A lot of guys that just want to shoot a grizzly on a spot and stalk hunt, basically, if you want to go after them in the fall, just pack like you're going on a sheep hunt and just go try to find a bear. That seems to be a really good way of thinking about it. Just go on a sheep hunt for bears.
Yep.
Because you're going to see grizzly bears in those high alpine fields that hold blueberries that time of year.
It's like going to a fight for a hockey game.
Right. Long live the sport of ice hockey.
But yeah, check your regs because you can be a couple miles from a game management unit and something and a grizzly be legal and not.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And I've known people that maybe didn't actually understand the border of where they were or something like that. Maybe it was legal to shoot a black bear where they were the unit they thought they were in, and they ended up just on the other side of a ridge or something like that.
Exactly.
And, so it is very important. The other thing I'm going to point out to our listeners real quick is the baiting season takes you from April 15th to June 30th. Now, the weird thing about Alaska is that, and we've touched on this before in a previous episode of this series, but the general tag and licensing system runs with the calendar year. So you get your new hunting license on the first of the year. It's good until the end of the year. You get your moose tags, caribou tags, everything right at the same time. They're good forever. They're good for the rest of the year. Now, bear, on the other hand, is weird in the sense that it is only good from July 1st to June 30th. So the black bear tags that you may use if you're doing this alpine style spot and stalk hunt later in the year, let's say you're scouting for moose or you're sheep hunting, that takes away from your tags for the next spring. And when you get done with the baiting season at the end of June 30th and you clean up your bait and you get out of there, you have to report all of your tickets. You have to close out all of your existing bear tickets and get new black bear tags.
Right.
And again, I think we've talked about it in the last one too. I don't understand why that is, but that is the calendar year for bear specifically.
The other thing that I want to mention is bear hide requirements. In harvesting black bears, if you shoot a black bear before June 1st in Alaska, you are required to salvage the meat as well as the hide and the skull. before June, I believe the hide is optional, but you have to you have to retrieve the skull and you have to retrieve all the meat.
Really?
The hide, I believe, is optional before June 1st.
Okay.
We can double check and verify
It's
that
on
in
black
the
bears,
regs.
not on grizzlies.
But, correct. I'm talking about black
Oh,
bears.
so
But then
the
after-
early black bears would be what I would think would be the more valuable hide.
Oh yeah,
And it still has
yeah,
all the down
yeah,
and everything.
absolutely. And that being said, I've never left a hide in the
Yeah.
field either. But that is an option. And then after June 1st, you do not have to harvest. You do not have to harvest the meat on black bears.
Really?
At that point, it is just hide and skull.
Okay.
So the legal harvest requirements change.
Now for grizzly and brown bear, I know that hide and skull is pretty
Correct.
much always a requirement.
Hide and
is
skull.
there any units that do require you to take the meat? Because I don't know of anybody that eats it.
Not brown or grizzly bears.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Not that I'm aware of.
I didn't know if there were certain units that maybe
I
had
can't
some
say
weird
I've ever
regs,
heard of
but
that either. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
You know, some people
Just- I
do
don't-
really like the meat.
Yeah.
really.
More
But
power to you.
Everybody I've heard that's tried it, and I haven't had the pleasure yet, but everybody says it's awful.
Tell you, the backstrap
But-
of a young grizzly, phenomenal.
Is it?
Other than that,
Okay.
Yeah.
if it has not been eating fish,
Yeah.
you know, a young interior
Yeah.
grizzly, I've had some really good backstrap off of those.
I've tried coastal brown bear twice, and that's been enough.
Really?
I don't have
And
any desire.
what would your best description be?
Oh,
Like, is it just
boy.
fishy, or is it like
well, non-fish
Like, I mean,
season, beginning of the or
because I guess when you're hunting them, the fish haven't run yet. So
Well, in the spring, but I've eaten both my brown bears from the fall.
oh, okay.
I say
Gotcha.
I've tried them in the fall, and I guess the best description would be a really sinewy steak that has an aftertaste of sardines.
oh.
It's not very tender, and it's not it's not all that chewable either
Mm.
because of all the. I'm not really sure what makes it that texture, but it's just kind of
Just
off.
Doesn't
Grizzly bears in the
yeah.
fall. I mean, if it was just eating blueberries, I probably wouldn't have a problem giving it a shot. You know,
Mhm.
I've eaten interior grizzly bear before, but not a lot. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know anybody personally that eats it.
the way it was explained to me is you'll know if you're going to eat it the second you walk up to it.
Mm.
When you smell it, when you cut it open and you get that first whiff,
Yeah.
that's when you'll know if it's been eaten on dead caribou carcasses
Yeah.
or berries,
Yeah.
basically. So
Only folks I know that have ever eaten grizzly are the ones that shoot them over bait in the early spring,
Mhm.
and they'll take a little bit off. You know, like Mariah said, the straps,
You know, I
Yeah.
had a,
or in the fall if they've been eating berries.
that was actually a fall that I had the straps on.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
yeah, and I hadn't shot the bear. It was a buddy, my dad's buddy on the hunt. But yeah, and it was. I mean, they were very tender, very good, and a little
Interesting.
sinewy. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
thing about
Yeah,
brown
yeah.
and grizzlies is there's going to be sinew. It's going to be a tougher meat, and that's
Yeah,
one of the,
yeah.
I think that's one of the main reasons people don't like it because people like all kinds of weird flavors in meat.
Well-
when it's really tough,
Well,
Yeah.
and that's kind of bear in general because even with black bears, all the black bears meat that we use, you know, we pretty much always grind it
Mm-hmm.
or we make things that you can cook in a slow cooker.
Yeah.
I have tried to make black bear steaks and I just don't really care for it. It's just kind of
Right.
the same thing. And again, with a trichinosis, you have to cook it to such a high temperature
right.
that, you know, it kind of ruins how I usually like my steaks anyway,
Mm-hmm.
medium rare or nothing. So,
I found personally with black bear, especially a younger one, you can get some really tender meat. And I think the FDA says 160 degrees. I've read a lot.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I've read a lot that 140, as long as
Yeah.
you get your internal temp to 140,
Mhm.
you're good.
Yeah.
You know, and certain
Yeah.
people, they're just going to say, well, I'm going to make sure I'm at 170, which,
Right.
you know, if you like that dry meat, more power to you. But
Shoe leather.
Go ahead and read what
Yeah.
you just highlighted
Okay.
there, Mariah.
So we're looking at the regs here, and it says if you take a brown grizzly bear, a brown or grizzly bear, in a brown bear subsistence area under a registration permit for subsistence purposes, you are required to salvage all meat for human consumption. Salvage of the hide or skull is optional.
Huh.
That's only in a subsistence.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. And that's found on page 25. It's the third paragraph up from the bottom on the right side column. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, that again, that doesn't really apply to us.
Right.
You know, we're not shooting brown bears in subsistence areas under registration permit. So,
and if you are the person that's shooting brown bears in a subsistence area, I'm sure you already knew that. So,
yeah.
But anyway, so let's get into, so that covers the kinds of bears we can hunt,
Right.
the ways you can hunt them. Now, then there is one more, but we're going to save that for the later segment. But
Okay.
So how about telling the size and the sex of your black bear specifically? Let's start with black bears.
I mean, black bears.
It's really going to be kind of universal, but
right. I mean, bear judging in general is all kind of it is pretty similar across the board. I would say there are some. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's actually start with telling the difference between a grizzly and a black bear.
Okay.
So for those that see maybe a chocolate phase black bear come into the bait,
that's actually important because I know somebody who shot blonde black bear. It just had dark legs, but I mean it was blonder than a lot of grizzlies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My first black bear I shot was a real blonde one. I shot it with my recurve, and my father-in-law was with me at the time, and he shot one 3 hours later that night. These were over a bait, and his was even more blonde than mine was.
Really?
Now they were both only like 5.5 foot black bears, kind of average, adult black bears.
Yep.
But they, the coloration was, pretty blonde, like I said. So that color really doesn't necessarily mess with a lot of people as long as the bodily characteristics are pretty obvious.
Yep.
But I kind of take that for granted because I've looked at so many bears, and I'm sure Mariah feels the same way.
Exactly the same way.
I know someone, you and I both know someone that we'll just say pulled up on a bear and shot it thinking it was a color phase black bear. Ended up being like a 6 foot grizzly bear. And luckily for this individual, it was in an area that he could shoot a grizzly bear, and it was totally legal. It wasn't over a bait. I believe he was just riding somewhere and he just saw it cross a trail or something and pulled up and shot it.
Yeah.
That being said, I would exercise a little bit more discretion because had it been in an area that grizzly bears were not open and he would have shot it thinking it was a black bear, that could have been a problem. Certainly would have been a violation of the law.
And the reason I kind of bring this up especially is because of stories like that. I know of several stories similar to that. But also, I mean, you can look on videos and social media posts from different people saying, look at this grizzly, and it's actually just a color phase black bear.
Yeah.
And to the experienced eye, that immediately.
Right.
You can tell just by the features, but what are those features?
So that being said, I'm just going to keep talking about this particular instance because that person sent me a message with a photo of that bear. He had it on a tarp, I believe it was. I still have the photo somewhere. And it was on a tarp, and he had brought it out whole on his 4-wheeler. And he sent me a photo, and he said, "Look at this nice color phase black bear I just shot." And I immediately fired off a text message to my buddy Remy, and I believe to Mariah.
I don't think you texted me about it at the time. You told me about it later.
Okay, so I sent it to Remy, and I said, a friend of mine just shot this. What do you think? And I wanted to leave it open-ended because I looked at it and said, that's a grizzly for sure. And I just wanted to hear his opinion and hear what he said about it. He said, well, I hope he's in a grizzly bear unit. And he said, I responded and said, well, he swears it's a black bear. And he stuck by it until he took it to Fish and Game, and the Fish and Game biologist told him, no, that's a grizzly, man. He was stuck to the idea that he had shot this very grisly looking color phase black bear. And I think it was likely because he didn't want his grizzly bear for that year to be this little dinky guy.
Yeah, no kidding.
It was not much of a grizzly bear. Good for him. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't have shot it had I seen it and it would have been an illegal area. It's a grizzly bear, whatever. You're just killing predators, right? But that being said, I don't think that he wanted to claim that as his grizzly bear for the year. And it was also his first grizzly bear that he'd ever shot. So anyway,
and then he probably notched a black bear tag that he then lost.
I don't know. We never really discussed it that much after that. I never even saw the hide of that bear. I never even saw that bear in person. I just saw the photo.
Something you're real proud of till you find out you were really wrong.
Yeah, and I texted him and I said, "Dude, that's a grizzly bear," and he argued with me about it and swore up and down that it was just this lunky, masculine looking black bear. And I said no, and like you said, the feature that really stood out to me, that there were two things that really stuck out to me that made me say that's a grizzly bear. One of them, and this is the easiest thing to look at, the hump.
Yep.
The hump is like
Yep.
the biggest, most obvious feature on a grizzly bear that black bears don't have.
They have no
They
hump.
do not have humps like that.
No.
Even a big, brawny
Oh, yeah.
black bear boar does not have this massive hump on the back
No.
of his, on the top of his shoulders.
Yeah, from shoulder to shoulder, it's going to be broad and it's going to be very big, but it's going to be flat across that
Right.
section. There.
Exactly. So anyway, I responded and I said, look at the hump on it. And then I said, look at the feet. And I remember the feet just being big and
Right.
just abnormally big for a black bear, you know, that he was trying to convince me it was a black bear. I said, dude, I've shot a pile of black bears and I've never seen a black bear with feet like this. This is a grizzly bear.
Yep.
I'm actually going to try to find the photo now that I'm talking about it so much.
So
But-
you showed me that photo, and I think you may later, and you may have said, "Hey, what do you think this is?" And I
Yeah.
was like,
Just trying to pose the question.
"Right." And I, obviously, I'm sure I said grizzly.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah, you did right
you know,
away.
well, one of the biggest things for me with a size bear like that, a 6-foot grizzly bear isn't going to be this muscular looking.
It was scrawny looking.
Right. They look scrawny because it's a young bear.
Yeah.
Any young bear looks scrawny.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. They're going to be long legged,
They're going to look
small
like they
bellies.
have. Right. It's because it can be deceiving, especially with black
Yep.
bears. Because black bears a young black bear can look really tall.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just because he doesn't have that fat and bulk yet.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, one thing I like to do at the bait, especially for my cameras, is I'll put markers on trees at certain known heights.
Oh, really?
And so then as the bear, I'll try to figure out where they're going to walk right past, and so then I can get a nice shoulder height on that bear and judge it more accurately.
That'd be good for
Yeah.
all you rookies out there.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea.
I'm just messing with you,
It's not
James.
a
I'm just
bad
messing with
idea.
you. It's funny because, like I said, I've been looking at bears at bait since I was 7 years old.
Right.
There's never, the thought hardly even crosses my mind to even think about like, oh, is that a black bear or a grizzly bear? Unless it's a bad
Right.
picture, like, a black and white picture on a game cam of the side of a bear can be hard sometimes,
Yeah.
especially if it's like a small female grizzly. That's when you might sit there scratching your head, especially if it's the same size as a large boar. Black bear. That's the only time that there's been like confusion for me. Like, and usually it doesn't take very long to figure out what's what.
Yeah.
But other than that, I've never had a problem of looking at oh my. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a,
We're looking at the picture right now.
Yeah.
that's a
So right now.
grizzly.
Yeah, exactly. So, that being said, I think the hump is the easiest distinguishing feature between a grizzly and a black bear.
Yep.
If we're talking about grizzly bears that are similar in size to a full-grown mature black bear.
Now, one thing you'd mentioned was the feet.
Mm-hmm.
And a big difference between the two species is going to be the claws
Yes.
on those feet.
Yes.
You're-
If you're looking at a black bear track, the little marks from the claws in the soft dirt, and just for this particular example, you're going to have the pad, and then very close, within a couple of inches for sure of that front pad imprint is going to be the claw marks. On a grizzly bear, those are going to be a lot farther stretched out forward.
Right.
The black bear's toes, and this aids in them climbing trees,
Right. Yep.
are a lot more curved and curved down at a sharper angle, whereas the grizzly bears are more made for digging.
Yep.
They dig up a lot of roots. They dig up, heck,
Ground squirrels.
wolf dens. We've seen videos of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, digging up ground squirrels, digging up marmots, digging up roots and berries and all those kinds of things in the soil. Those claws are more straight out, and they're a lot longer than a black bear claw.
Does it say in the regs what the average is for these two species? Because I know with black bears it's like 2 to 3 inches is the average for
I don't
an
think
adult. But
in the
I'm not
actual
a
sure
grizzly
the
regs
brown
it
bear
lists that.
would be
Because
much
that's not
longer
something.
than that.
I mean, if you're looking at tracks, that'll help you.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what it's going towards.
And it's not
looking
like
at
a
the
hard
tracks.
and fast rule either.
Mhm.
I've seen some grizzly bears that have short-ish claws, like contemporary to other grizzly bears.
Yep.
But even a short claw on a grizzly bear is still going to be pretty obvious that it's a grizzly bear and not a black
A
bear.
short claw on
Yeah.
a grizzly bear looks like a really long claw on a black bear.
Right.
And if you're not looking at, let's say you're looking at, say you're sitting in a tree stand, you're looking down at a bear and you can see its feet.
Mhm.
A black bear's fingernails
Mhm.
are going to be black.
Yeah.
Almost every anything I've ever shot. They're usually or very, very dark.
Yeah.
Whereas the grizzly bears are a lot more likely to be a lighter color, and they're going to stick out. And you're going to know a black bear's feet. You may not notice them on a black bear very quickly. Whereas a grizzly bear, he sticks his leg up in the air, or you just look down and look at his feet, and you've got a good view of his foot. You're going to see
sticking out.
those claws. Yeah.
And a lot of them, when you just see him walking, you can just see those things.
Right.
They're very noticeable.
They shine. They shine in the sun. Yeah. Whereas the black bears will be not only are they curved and close to the foot, they're in the hair a lot more.
Right. Exactly. There's hair growing all around them, and they're a lot more covered in that aspect.
And they're closer together. Right, sideways too.
Yeah. Right. Yes. So that's a really good way of just telling two things. Now, obviously, the facial features are going to be a lot different as well. A grizzly bear boar from a sow is generally a big boar grizzly from an average sow grizzly is going to be a little bit easier to distinguish between a big boar black bear and a average sow black bear. I think anyway. Black bears can be tougher to judge boar and sow, and even then,
right.
I've talked to a lot of people that agree with this. Anybody who says I'm 100% that's a boar on a black bear still is only about 90% chance of being right.
Yeah,
I've seen some sows that are pretty, they have a lot of characteristics that I have looked at and said that's a boar. And I've also shot black bears that I thought were sows that were just big sows and ended up being a boar. So I think the black bears are a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
Brown and grizzly bears are generally a little bit easier just because of the proportionate difference. Because a big grizzly is a lot bigger and a lot different looking than an average sow grizzly is.
Now, between the facial features of a grizzly and a black bear, that's a good way to tell the difference too.
That's a pretty easy way to tell the difference.
You can look at its face just so it's sticking its head right in the camera, basically.
Exactly. That being said, the really, really common one that a lot of people go off of for sizing different bears, and this goes for black and grizzly bears and brown bears as well, is the space on the top of the head in between the ears. Grizzly bears and brown bears and black bears all alike. Generally speaking, if you have a really big bear, the ears are going to be more off to the side of the head almost. As the bear's head grows, those ears come off the side of the head. I can tell you're going to say something there. Go ahead.
Well, I'm leading into the part I told you about before the show. So what I did before this actual episode is I went through and I took
that's right.
Notes on the actual ADF&G training for this. So for anybody listening, if you want to come up and hunt for, I believe it's only required for brown bears for you to watch this video, but if you're going to be baiting bears, you actually have to go through a clinic through ADF&G, and they're going to make you watch this exact same video. And so they have a bunch of different things that they put in the training. So what I think would be good is to kind of bounce that off of real life experience so that people can see what the state tells you you're going to see versus what you might actually really see.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So we're going to go.
I think that pretty much covered what we were talking about, though. Sorry to interrupt.
As far as the difference, between those two, we can recap real quick.
I would say the best thing people could do, sorry, I lost my train of thought there as you were bringing that up. The best thing I would say that you could do to be able to tell a grizzly from a black bear, if you're in that situation where you could see either or, let's just say that you have a chocolate black bear next to an average sized grizzly bear in the interior. They're very similar colored. Let's just say that you have a game camera and you have pictures of two different bears that you can tell are different bears, but you're trying to tell, man, is this just a really big black bear? Or is this just a really average or small grizzly bear?
And especially in some of those waning light hours, those trail cameras don't take very good.
Exactly. So that being said, I think the best thing you can do is just look at a lot of photos of them and then just try to pick up on those details. Look for the hump. Look at the head structure. Is the nose long and squared off? Is the nose kind of a square shape, or is it kind of coned and almost rounded looking? I've noticed that black bears have kind of a round bridge to their nose.
They almost look more dog-like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grizzly bears have a lot more pronounced of a schnoz, if I can say it that way. They a big boar grizzly bear, or even a sow grizzly bear for that matter, has a more pronounced snout, and it's almost more of a square shape to it than black bears are. That's another good way of being able to tell. But again, nothing can replace just look at pictures and just Google photos of color phase black bears, and just scroll through all those hundreds of photos that are going to come up. Familiarize yourself with what the black bears look like, and then look up average size interior grizzly bear photos. And look at all those. And by the time you've looked at a lot of black bear photos, as soon as you see a grizzly bear, it's going to come on like a light bulb. Oh, well, that's obviously a grizzly bear, because look at the hump, look at the feet, look at the claws, look at the facial structure, look at the nose.
And these are all things that experienced bear hunters don't even have to think about. They just recognize it.
And even just talking about this, I'm having to think, okay, what do I actually acknowledge and look at? Because it's really hard for me to do that, because I'm just so used to it, because I've looked at so many different bears, whether in person or on other guides' phones. Look at this grizzly bear that my client shot, and I just look at it and I know that's a grizzly bear because he told me it was. So now when I look at it, my mind automatically registers it's a grizzly bear. So having to recount what actually what the actual features are that really make it stand out from a different bear, you have to think about that. So it's actually good that we brought this up, because it kind of makes me think about that, and it helps with communicating that to other people too. Talking about this on the podcast, it helps you be able to communicate that to another hunter. Someone that you're going to bring out there. Look, if this bear comes in and he looks like this, then that's not a bear we're after, Anyway, so yeah.
No, so a big thing,
Go ahead.
Once you can tell the difference between the two, is telling which gender it is. Is this male or a female bear you're looking at? Now, one thing that's interesting that ADF&G claims is that specifically for brown bears, they would be able to double the bag limit for coastal brown bears if hunters were better at not shooting females.
Really?
Yeah. And so in a lot of these areas, I know in I want to say the Kenai Peninsula was where it happened this last season, but they actually shut the brown bear hunt down early because so many sows had been taken. And so just like we had talked about this in the last episode, there's certain hunts where if too many females are shot, they will just shut the whole thing down. So the better you are at determining this, one, you're going to get a better quality bear. You're going to get a better trophy to take home with you. But the other thing is you're going to perpetuate that species a lot better. And so they're going to be able to reproduce, and you're going to be able to continue to come back and hunt them year after year, or, your buddies can come up and hunt, you can share the experience. And so, in the difference, that's what this video that they require you to watch goes over. And so the first thing that they go over, and this is one I found really interesting because I'd never actually heard this before, but was color. Now, according to the training in the Yukon area, the darker coat is a good indicator that a bear is likely a female, or is likely a male, and females tend to have more blonde characteristics.
I've noticed in the interior that's pretty much the case. I haven't seen very many light colored males. I'm trying to think of all the bears that we've looked at.
For the most part, I would agree.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen a couple of males that were pretty light in the interior. And that specifically mentions the Yukon, and that's further north. And I think, more northern parts of Alaska. That's probably definitely true. Would you agree? Like, I've definitely have trail cam pictures of like 3 or 4 bears, grizzly bears. And there's hardly any color difference, yet you're looking at 2 boars and 2 sows or something like that.
Now, and I will say that most of the very, very blonde sows that I have seen have typically been accompanied by, or very blonde grizzly bears I've seen have been accompanied by cubs. And so they're sows.
Oh, right. That makes that easy.
Yeah. I have definitely seen, well, actually, I'm on the Alaska Professional Hunters Association membership as a guide. It's kind of a route to get work, if you will. It's a big association. Anyway, I got their magazine a couple of months ago for the year, for the winter, and they had their awards, their APHA awards. And in the magazine, they had photos of different animals and different guides that kind of won each category, if you will. And there was a particular guide, James Smith. And I had seen the photos of this bear, but I didn't quite know how big it was. And it was over an 8-foot interior grizzly bear that was like bleach blonde. It was, like I said, 8.5 class bear. It was a huge grizzly bear. It was an interior. It's what it was labeled as. And it, like I said, bleach blonde hair color. And that's not something that I've seen a lot of. But now that I'm thinking about it, again, the bears that I've seen in the interior as far as grizzlies go, if it's not been kind of that brown or even dark brown color, it's been like the total opposite, which almost makes me think of like a color phase variant. It's not like a particular area has, you know, kind of a variance of dark, medium dark, you know, medium brown, and then light brown, and then like bleach blonde. It's either brown, like a grizzled brown color, or it's bleach blonde, like almost bordering on like a white color almost.
Yep.
So that's, I don't know how much, I'm not sure if there's like an actual class of color phase grizzly bears necessarily. I haven't heard of one.
I don't think so. I think it's just genetic.
Right. But that being said, for the most part, I would agree with that a lot of the interior grizzlies seem to be, a big boar is generally going to be darker for the most part. Again, not hard and fast, but it's kind of a good thing. And a lot of this is process of evaluation. You're looking for a lot of different things. You know, you're not just going to look at the color. You're going to look at the head and the body structure and all that. And I'm sure we'll get to that down this list. But.
And they didn't present this as like use this to judge whether you shoot it or not kind of thing. What they presented this in the training was for like, if you're looking at it through a spotting scope from a ways away, and you're wondering if you should even move in on this bear.
Okay.
If it has a dark coat, it's probably a good chance. So it's worth putting in the effort to get closer and take a closer look and look at these next several features.
Okay.
Now, the next one on the list was that they had brought up was the size of the ears. This is what you were just talking about.
Right.
Is that tiny ears compared to the head size spread off to the side of the head. I mean, it's an older, larger bear.
Right.
And I can attest to that with just the different bears that have come into the baits, you know, that I've run, and that when you have a doinker come in, you can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, on a young bear, those ears are close together and they stand straight up.
Looks like dog ears.
Yeah. They just, you can instantly look at it.
Yeah.
And tell that. And then I guess the ears don't grow in proportion to the body. You know, they kind of just reach that point and stay there. So as the body gets bigger. I
don't think that it's necessarily that the ears are smaller. I think it's that they look smaller in proportion to the head.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, and another thing I've noticed is I'd almost say more like cat ears than dog ears. A lot of dog ears are flat and, you know, lay on the sides.
Right.
But a young bear's ears a lot of times will have a little bit more of a defined point to them, whereas a larger bear's ears will look more like that rounded teddy bear look, especially on a grizzly bear.
That is very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you were, I don't know if you can remember where you were with the little spiel on the spacing, but that's another thing. They just kind of grow sideways almost. Right. So,
and again, it's not that the ears grow sideways. It's that as the skull gets bigger, as the head grows, they just kind of go off to the side more.
Right. And that's one thing that was kind of interesting about the bear I got to take this spring was I noticed that exact phenomenon because we were sitting in the stand and honestly, I wasn't even planning on hunting this night. I had walked into the bait on a Tuesday night of all nights and got off work. I was beat to death, but I needed to go out there and check the cameras. And as we pull the SD card, get up in the stands, and as we're sitting there, a little young bear runs into the bait and makes tons of noise. That's one way you know that they're young. And you know, but we heard it before we saw it, and so it comes barreling in there, and then it starts looking really kind of weird. Now I had skittish. Yeah, I wasn't wearing my hunting setup. I was in like a bright blue flannel, you know, not what you'd want to wear when you're hunting. But so then that thing was like we had just discussed. I mean, the ears stuck straight up off the top of its head. It was very young, very lanky, and you could just tell immediately it was a very young bear.
Yeah.
So it started looking kind of skittish and looking around and sniffing the air, and I thought it just smelled us because I hadn't been set up to hunt yet. And so it takes off. And I'm sitting there on my phone and I'm scrolling through pictures and I look down and there's a bear.
Through trail camera pictures.
Trail camera pictures, on my phone with the little card reader. And I look down because I noticed some movement and there's a bear right underneath my stand.
A different bear.
A different bear, yeah. And that was the immediate thing I noticed was the ear spacing. That was the very first thing I looked. I said, it's black and the ears are on the side of its head.
Yeah.
And that was the exact moment I decided I was going to take that one home with me that night. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so that's a good in the field determination of not necessarily gender, but of size.
Yep.
Right.
That is how you can tell a bear is older or if it's too young to shoot.
Right.
And we'll go over how young is too young, but in a little bit. But the next thing on this list is the neck width and length.
Okay.
So the next thing they talked about in the training was that a longer and thicker neck indicates that a bear may be a male. Females tend to have more compact and slender necks.
That's 100% correct.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Most boars that I've shot, I really can't think of any boars that I've shot that don't have much of a neck. Now, at first glance, if they're kind of turned and their neck is compressed a little bit, then it might look like they have a shorter neck, but in reality, it's just so thick and muscular that it just looks like an extension of the chest. You know, but the sows, when they give you a perfect profile standing look, their neck actually is shorter, and that is a really good way of being able to tell that as well.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that.
And
I've noticed that with black bears and grizzly or brown bears too.
But sows also has a thinner, more. It looks like a neck, like you say, on a boar.
It doesn't have that mass.
You've got that thick, like you say. It just looks like you're coming off the shoulders, going to the back of the skull, like almost a straight line or thicker.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. All right. So the next section would be head or size of head and shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a two-part. So it says the males have a squared head and extra wide shoulders, wider than the actual head is itself. When females in adolescence, the shoulders are typically the same width as the head. Females have more of a slender and long face, whereas males have a short, blocky face.
Right. Now, I used to think about that the wrong way. When I first started bear hunting and I was looking at a lot of brown bears and grizzly bears, I used to kind of think that the boars had a shorter face all the time. And I used it to the point of a fault.
Like the actual snout was shorter itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I assumed that the snout was going to be short and squared off more than the females. It's more of an overall head structural thing. The females have more of a cone shaped where if you start at the side of the widest point of the head on a female, it just looks feminine, if I can just say it that way. It just kind of cones down and is just very slender, very little facial differentiation between one part and the next. It just kind of cones down and out to the nose.
It's smooth.
Yeah. More so smooth than a boar. And a boar will have, like I mentioned earlier, especially on a big brown bear or grizzly bear, they have a really big defined squared nose bridge. That's more defined on a boar than a sow. And on the boars, they'll have a very noticeably blocky forehead compared to a sow will, compared to what a sow will, sorry. The other thing is, and this is particularly brown bears and grizzly bears, I've seen black bears that develop this as well, but it's a forehead crease.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I know what you're talking about.
That's formed by the muscles on the top of the bear's head. And on brown bears, you can even get like a triangle in the hair, right on. We would point to between our eyebrows. It would be right about there on a bear, and that's another really good way of judging a nice big mature boar as well. If they have that kind of a triangle rub in their forehead. Now, I have seen some smaller bears that have that, but it's not nearly as defined. I was on a hunt with a client last spring that shot a brown bear that had a very defined forehead triangle rub. He had a dark-haired color throughout his entire body. His back end was a little bit rubbed shorter, not rubbed thin, but just shorter haired, more like a buffalo butt type of hair.
Okay.
So on his rump, he had kind of a blonde patch back there. Just the guard hair was kind of rubbed off, and the guard hair was real dark, and the under hair was kind of more of a dark blonde color. And so on his forehead, there was a rub right between his eyes that was a blonde triangle. And that's a really good way of being able to tell kind of the size of the head as well. I'm sorry, the maturity of a boar in particular. That they'll get that forehead crease, or that little indentation in the top of their forehead. And I've seen that on black bears, but on brown bears especially, I've seen that forehead triangle. And that is another way. Like I said, it's not like a definitive 100% way to tell. That's another way of adding one more thing to the list of characteristics.
Yeah, and the thing is, you should never base your decision off one feature.
Right.
You should be looking at all of these features repeatedly, not only from one angle either.
Right.
And you had discussed it in the episode about guns for bear hunting, where you should be within 100, 150 yards. And so as you're seeing this thing from a far off distance, working on getting closer to it, working your way into that 100, 150 yard mark, or closer if you can, then you should be running through these checklists over and over again.
Generally speaking, I'm just using my brown bear spring guiding as an example. Generally, when you see a brown bear, if you're a good ways away, you're looking at it through binoculars first to identify it, and then you pull out the spotter if you think it's a bear worth looking at. You zoom in the spotter, and you kind of get a decent look at all those characteristics, and you can kind of get a field assessment. And if you think he has a lot of features, if you think he might be good enough, then you get closer, and preferably you get inside 300 or 400 yards with a spotter to get a simulated 25-yard view of it, if you will. A spotter on 60 power at 300 or 400 yards is going to give you everything you need to see.
Yep.
And then obviously after that, then you close in the distance, because like we said, these are dangerous game animals.
Yep.
You want to be close to shoot them, and that also gives you your last moment of assurance. That being said, that dark bear that we got last spring on that guided hunt with the client, that had that forehead crease, he had the body structure, and we saw him, I want to say 250 yards away when he popped out on the beach there. And we were on our way out from one spot from hunting, and the wind had changed and it had gotten bad. And so we left the one spot. We were walking out to leave that particular spot. And on the way out, this other bear stepped out down the beach away from us, up in the grass. And so we immediately dropped, got out of sight. He hadn't seen us yet. And then we pulled out the spotter at like 250 yards. We took a look at it and decided, yep, he's got everything he needs. And when he turned, I remember distinctly when he turned, I could see that very defined crease in his forehead, and the ears were real wide. And he had those big lobes on top of his head, and I saw that triangle, and that was my last thing that I needed to see. I said, "Yep, that's 100%." And there was another guide on that hunt along with that client, and the other guide and I both 100%. That was the last look we got, and we said, "Yep, we're killing this bear."
Yep.
And that was the deciding factor. But after everything else, and we'd looked at a lot of other characteristics, body size, and another kind of a. This is kind of a sub point that I'll make just because we're here. Kind of a subjective thing that I was told years ago. I can't remember for the life of me who told me this, but an old bear guide told me that if you can fit a brown bear's head length, so from the base of the head to the tip of the nose, inside the body cavity, so not the neck, but inside the body cavity 3 times lengthwise, then you're likely looking at a very mature, trophy class brown bear. And he said 10 foot or, within 6 inches of 10 feet. So, it could be 9.5, could be 10.5. And that's, it's really hard to give hard and fast numbers in a situation like that. If you have a long enough look, you might be able to get close. But generally, if you say that's a 9.5 foot class bear, you can tape it out, and it might be 9 foot, or it might be 9.5, or 9.11, or even 10 plus. But that being said, that head length measurement, I've seen it work for the most part. There have been a few boars that I've seen shot over the years that I wouldn't have been able to get 3 head lengths in that made it over 9.5 feet, and it was just their body structure.
Right.
And if a bear has an enormously large head, and his body just isn't all that greatly big, which doesn't happen all that often. That could be another way to shoot holes in that theory as well. Like I said, it's very subjective, but it's just kind of one of those things that you just add to your toolkit, and sometimes it'll work out with brown bears.
Now, along with kind of maybe semi-subjective but possibly useful things, you were telling us a method about, let's say you're out on a spot and stalk hunt.
Yeah.
And you were maybe not able to see the bear, but you can see fresh tracks in the sand or the beach mud, whatever. Yeah. You were explaining a method that's sometimes used for tracks to gauge size on bears.
Yeah, a lot of people take this one as gospel. I haven't really done this a whole lot and taken it at full face value. But I know a lot of guys that do, and I've cross-checked it a few times, and so I'll mention it on here. It's if you see a track and you know that this bear that you're looking at in the spotter or whatever is this track that you found on the beach, and you can watch him, walk down, and you happen to go up and intersect his tracks. If you measure that front pad width and then add an inch to that,
I'm gonna be really specific here. That's specifically the front pad.
Correct.
Yeah.
Front pad width in the sand or the mud or whatever, and then add 1 inch to that, and then turn it into feet. That's if it's a 6-inch wide print of the pad, and then you add an inch to that to make it 7. It's a 7-foot bear.
Gotcha.
I'm not 100% sure that's going to work every time.
Yeah.
Again, it's just another one of those little subjective things.
But it might be one of those things where if there's a bend in the beach and you can't get a good visual on the bear, and you're wondering if you should even pursue it and spend the time to go after it. It might give you a heads up.
It's more likely in brown bear hunting that you're just going to just walk across a set of tracks on a beach that you've been hunting, and you see this track, and you know there's a big bear in the area.
Yeah.
So it's worth sticking around there for the next few days to try to see if he comes back out.
Yep.
But a lot of times they will. That they have their little circuits they run, and they'll come out at 7 o'clock at night, and they'll be on the beach for an hour, and then they're gone. And they might do that every night, or they might do it one night and you never see the thing again. But that being said, if you see a track and you're looking in that area for a good bear, this will give you a good idea of how big the bear is that's working that particular spot.
Yep.
Again, I've been told that that's a pretty accurate way of telling it. None of the guides in our camp that I work with in the spring necessarily hold to that very strongly that I'm aware of. I've never really asked them about it. But it is a pretty commonly accepted way of estimating square size of the hide.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, yet another thing that you can just kind of add to the toolbox.
Yep. Now back on definitive tactics, though, and I struggle to say definitive, but the shoulders. Now the shoulders, when you're trying to tell the difference between a boar and a sow, is going to be, for the most part, a fairly surefire method of use. Being said that a male is going to have more predominantly bulky shoulders. A lot of that body weight is going to be more towards the front, and that's universal on both black bears and grizzlies and brown bears. A female sow is going to have more weight in the hip area. It's going to see, when you're watching them walk broadside, you're going to see a lot more of that kind of the weight just kind of sitting in the back half of the body versus the front half.
Right.
And to my experience, that's been fairly universal every time. And that's actually one of the more deciding factors I use when trying to depict it is, the facial features are good, but like when you can see those shoulders,
right,
that's a really good indicator that you're looking at a male versus a sow.
Yep. Those big, muscular shoulders on the bears, that on the boars, is generally a pretty good way of telling as well. That is true.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's another thing that I would add to that. Speaking of shoulder size, and we were just talking about head size and head configurations, I have seen in a few cases where you get a really, really big bodied boar that makes the head look small. Even though it does have the features of that squared off blocky forehead, even with a crease and the squared off nose bridge and all that, I have seen where it has all of those features, but the head overall doesn't look all that big,
right,
compared to the monstrous body. You mentioned earlier about the shoulder width on a front-on look.
Yep.
The females will generally have a slender, a more slender body profile.
Mhm. It's almost streamlined from the
front.
hips.
Right.
From the hips to
From
the
the
nose,
front.
it's almost more streamlined.
Right. So if you're
Yeah.
looking at it from the front, the head won't look necessarily bigger than the rest of the body.
Mhm.
Whereas on a boar, you could have it where the head looks a lot bigger compared to the rest of the body.
Mhm.
But like I said, in some situations, and that's why we keep saying this is all subjective, because a lot of bear hunting, a lot of bear judging is all subjective. And it's kind of, like I said, it's a process of elimination
Yep.
of all these different factors that you have to weigh in
Yep.
to just come to the conclusion. And like I said, even then, there's still a small chance that it could just be a big old sow that just has all these features.
It's also a big reason we decided to do an entire episode just
Right.
on bears, is
Yeah.
because
Bears are definitely the most highly contested
yeah,
animals for judging boar versus sow on all of the forums and all that
yep,
amongst hunters. So that being said, that the head size compared to the body can be off from what you would think.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people picture a big brown bear boar as just having this monstrous head compared to the rest of the body.
yep.
And while that's true a lot of the times, a huge bodied boar might might make his head look pretty small
Yeah.
in relative comparison to the big body.
Would you say that seems to be like a regional genetics kind of thing, or just simply an
I
age
don't
thing?
really think so. I think
Yeah.
it's just individual bears.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would mention, you mentioned that the hips on the females being bigger. The back half is generally bigger on a female than a boar is.
That's why we like them.
The boars, I've noticed boars that their back end kind of has a saggy look to it, like an old man in a pair of jeans.
Like an old farmer.
Like an old man in a pair of jeans. There's nothing back there.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that a lot with bears too. A big boar, he'll have a big old front end and big, strong, muscular shoulders, and the farmer throwing hay bales type of thing.
Yeah. Right.
But there's not much to his seat, and I've seen that a lot with bears too.
I was thinking about that too.
And to that illustration, when you watch, let's just give the illustration between a guy like me. I'm 6'2" and I weigh $190. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm not a very big guy. I'm not a heavily built person.
Yeah.
Compare the way I walk to the way a 350-pound power lifter walks.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a difference in that. In that gait, in how the body swings,
Or how they waddle. But,
Okay, but I'm gonna throw a term out at you here: swagger.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
a brown bear, a big brown bear, and even a black bear too. There's a difference in how a big boar walks compared to a sow.
Yeah.
Big boars don't just pick their legs up and walk straight.
Mm-hmm.
No,
They kind of swing. And
like a
big,
bulldog.
And big bears will even get kind of pigeon-toed looking, where
Yeah.
their front feet will kind of stick in towards each other as they walk, and they'll get that pigeon-toed walk,
Yep.
where their elbows are almost bent off to the sides a little bit. Like Mariah said, like a bulldog walk.
Mhm.
And they swing their back hips to
Yep.
get that
Yeah.
body moving. Okay? That's a really good way
Yeah.
of judging black bears and brown bears and grizzly bears alike, is when they have that swagger. Those
Mhm.
big, old, mature boars have that swagger to their walk. And I have never seen a sow walk like that, ever.
And that's one reason why at my bait, I will typically, I'm running multiple cameras.
Yep.
I'll typically have anywhere from 3 to, well, typically it is 3, but, cameras at different angles. One might be closer to the barrel, so I can get kind of an up close look at them. One might be more of a wide angle, far out shot, so I can see primarily where they're coming in and out of.
And then one on video.
And one on video.
Yep.
And it's just for that reason,
Right.
because, you want to be able to get those still shots to be able to judge all these other characteristics,
Right.
and get those good quality still photos. But
Mhm.
You want to see
being
him
able to
walking
see
in and
that
walking
gait,
out.
yeah, that's a big factor.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Those big bears carry themselves like they're a big dominant boar.
mhm.
That's, I would say, of most of the stuff that we've talked about today, that's the one thing that I would probably stick to as the hard and fast thing that I've
Yeah.
never seen a sow do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
You're
see
right.
a big bear with a bunch of these other characteristics
Mhm.
and he has a big swagger walk like that,
Yep.
I would probably be able to bet money on that's a boar.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is all just a big toolbox of bear judging tools.
Yep.
And if he has a bunch of the other features, the squared off nose bridge, the blocky forehead, the crease in the
Mhm.
forehead, or the diamond in the forehead, He has big front shoulders, kind of a droopy rear end.
Yeah.
But he has that big swagger walk. That's a boar.
Yep. Now, one weird one, and I'm going to bring this up because I had never heard this before in my life until I watched this video, is they say you can tell the difference based on the fluffiness of the fur. Now, and I'm only bringing this up because it's in the ADF and G training.
Okay.
So I would think this would be super subjective based on
Extremely
whether they're
subjective.
wet, are they not wet, are they
Right.
muddy, are they not muddy.
What time of year
anyway,
is it?
Right.
Yeah.
So now it says that females and young bears seem to have fluffier fur. It may seem to stand up more and be lighter than older bears. Male fur lays flatter and seems smoother. Now, I cannot personally say I've ever noticed this in any of my bear adventures.
I'm trying hard to think.
Yeah, I can't think of a time I looked at a bear and was like, oh, that one's fluffier than the last one I looked at.
Tremendous amount of pictures of grizzly bears on baits.
Yeah.
And I can't necessarily think of a particular instance, but I might be able to go through pictures and say, I can see that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say I don't know if that would even ever be something I'd think of as a contributing factor.
Right, yeah.
Now, you will notice definitely a younger bear might look like he's just got this fluffy teddy bear look to him.
Right,
Yeah. And not even necessarily a like a cub, but like a young bear, even like a 3-year-old grizzly. A lot of times they travel in pairs or, they stick together for a little while.
Yep.
And those will look definitely I've seen a difference there.
Yeah.
But they're small and there's so many other things to look at. I can't see ever using that in the field.
No.
Yeah, that's
No.
it struck me as so weird. That's why I just had to bring it up.
That one I'm going to shoot down.
Yeah.
I'm like thinking about looking at some photos right now because it's so.
Yeah. I don't think I would ever use that in any situation, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I said, I described the one bear that we got last spring that I was talking about earlier that had that predominant forehead crease and that diamond in his forehead. And like I said, he had good hair on most of his body, but his rear end had, some rubbing on it.
Yeah.
And like I said, it wasn't really rubbed all that bad. It was just the guard hair was rubbed off, and underneath was like that buffalo butt type of hair.
Yep.
It was short and kind of matted and thick. And I don't think I would go off of that for anything.
And that's just the thing is, when they're getting into the heat of the later spring, and then the temperatures are rising and everything like that, these bears, they will literally rub themselves off, and that sounded wrong, but they will rub up against trees and rocks and all kinds of other things. And, they'll completely take themselves bald in certain areas. Anybody that's run a bait and has camera pictures or even taken a bear, late in
Some
June.
of them look like they have the mange.
Yeah, I've seen their whole forehead be completely bald, like an old man, or like they've got the parts of their back, where their entire from the shoulder to the hind end is just completely rubbed. Completely bald, and so
just like a big gray spot
using
of skin.
the fur as the defining factor, I really struggle with saying that.
I'm looking at pictures right now, and
it's too subjective.
Everything else we've talked about, I see, but these two bears I'm looking at is a sound boar I had on my bait last year, and I think I can see it, but that's after hearing that, right? So here, let me
see that.
So here, let me switch to where it's left or right or something here. So so the first one you're looking at, swipe. So there's your boar. So that's his butt, right? Very obviously big. That's a very nice interior grizzly.
Yep.
And then we go over here, and there's a sow. She's obviously a lot smaller.
I guess that answers the question.
But it's hard to. You don't in that picture. You don't see any difference at all. But it's a much lighter colored bear for sure.
Yeah, coloration,
which would fall back to the color part. But the fluffiness though is like,
But that's the boar again.
I don't think
they are there together.
I don't think that passes the real world experience test.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right. Yep.
So anyway, the last thing that the training talks about in the video.
Well, I just have a quick comment to say.
Oh, sure. Go for it.
We can shoot that theory down like a Chinese spy balloon.
Nice.
Preferably before it gets to the other side of the country and completes its mission. But
Right.
Oh, I was waiting to put that one in this episode today.
you really got another one over Prudhoe Bay?
Dude, there's been like 4 of them this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was for work. I was out at the NOAA station, and that was all the raging news.
We need to get a bunch of guys up in Prudhoe when the next one comes over and just walk out and moon the thing so that China gets that picture.
Right.
There's
Take
a bright
that.
spot in Prudhoe.
Take that, you bunch of commies.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, sorry.
So the last thing that the training goes over after that. So these are the defining features once you find the bear.
Mhm.
They actually did lay out some times you should be hunting and places you should be hunting where you're more likely to hit a male versus a sow. This
Okay.
one I really want to run through the real life experience test. So males are more likely to be, this is a 4-part, so I'm going to just go through all 4 and then you guys can pick it apart as you want. 1, more active in the spring than sows. 2, more active in the afternoon and evening. 3, in valley bottoms rather than ridge tops. And 4, on previous kill sites. That's where they say when, where, and basically you should look
Let
for,
me take this
for
one.
board. Yeah, go for it.
I have black bears are very predictable that way.
Yeah,
Grizzly bears are not.
yeah.
And I haven't seen necessarily a difference in black bears, male sow to boar,
Mm-hmm.
that way either.
That's what this is all talking
Now,
about.
I know it's sound to boar. Now, grizzlies do whatever they want, whatever time of day.
Yeah.
Okay. Black bears, you can plan on when you're going to be there and when he's going to be there almost.
Yeah,
Right.
But for either,
But differentiate from sow to boar.
for either gender.
Right. For either gender, I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
But like, I would say, I'm just saying, black bears are very scheduled compared to a grizzly.
Yes,
Mhm.
but this is talking about boar versus sow.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I'm just making a point since we're on the topic.
Yeah.
But anyway, I could see perhaps, although I don't have a lot of experience with kill sites,
Mhm.
maybe they'd be more likely to make themselves known there. Because I mean, a sow's number one thing, especially with cubs, is going to be protecting the cubs, and
Yeah.
especially in the spring, a sow's going to have cubs that she's trying to protect. I haven't seen those other things, and maybe a biologist could sit down with us and show us evidence for all these things we're trying to shoot down. But the problem is you can't use these hunting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a great way to think about it. We all run bear baits.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A bear bait, they treat like a kill site.
Yeah.
Okay.
basically.
As long
Yeah.
as there's food there, they're going to keep coming back.
Right. Yeah.
Same way with a moose carcass or a
Yeah,
caribou
that's a good
carcass
point.
or
Mhm.
whatever they're going to kill. Okay.
Yep.
It's just a food source. They don't know that it's a bear bait.
Yeah.
It's just an easy food source, which to
Mhm.
them, everything else in life that's an easy food source is a kill site as
Yep.
far as meat goes.
Right.
So I could see, okay. So on that note, when you have a sow and cubs on a bait
Mm-hmm.
and a boar comes in, the boar runs them off.
Yeah.
Or the sow leaves before he even gets there because she
Mhm.
smells him and hears him coming in and says,
Yeah.
nope,
Yeah.
gets his wind and just takes off.
Which, for those listening, is because bears are actually cannibals.
Oh, yeah.
And so the boars will come in and the bears have a really weird breeding cycle because the females actually have almost total control over when they go into heat and don't. And so the boars will come in and try to kill the cubs of this sow. And then once she's cubless, she will then actually go into heat and he will try to breed her.
She
And
can,
so
but
that's-
I don't think that's why they do it. I think they just do it because they do it.
Yeah. But generally speaking, that's
Yes.
why a sow is so afraid or is so
That is
cautious
a very
around a
popular
boar.
theory.
Yeah,
Right,
it
right.
is
Yeah.
because to protect the cubs.
Right. So of those 4 things that you just mentioned, I would say the only one that I would give any credit to for judging boar versus sow
Mm-hmm.
would be the kill site one.
Okay.
If you see a few bears on a bait and there's one that keeps running all of them off,
Mm-hmm.
it's likely going to be a big dominant boar.
Yeah. Yep.
I could see that that a boar, obviously, if a boar kills a moose and a sow comes in, he's going to run her off, especially if she has cubs. She's going to run her off and try to kill the cubs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's the only one that I could give any credit to. But even then, what if there wasn't a boar around and a sow killed a moose and there's a sow sleeping on this moose carcass and you find it in the mountains
Yep.
or in a valley somewhere? and it's the only bear on it, and you go up and shoot it, and it's a sow. You can't 100% definitively say that, well, there's a kill here and there's a grizzly bear on it. It's got to be a boar.
I think what they were hinting at is just these are where boars are more likely to be. Not that it's a definitive, this is where they'll be, but more if you want to go after a boar and then run through this checklist and have it be more of a success that when you run through this checklist, you're going to end up saying, yes, it is old enough. Yes, it is a boar. That these are the spots you should be looking for.
Okay. Well,
it is the way they worded it.
As far as the valleys and the times, I really can't give any credit to that. That's going to be more of a maturity and preference thing than anything else.
Right. Yeah.
If you have a grassy beach on the coast that is lush bear food in the springtime in May, and you have a little bear out there feeding, as soon as a big bear comes out, he's going to throw the little one out. He's going to run him out of there. And that little guy is not just going to stick around for the show, because that bear will kick him out or, kill it if it sticks around and tries to fight.
Yeah.
So the bigger bears get dominance, but a big sow will run a young boar off as well.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So that's I would say that's more of a maturity and size preference thing than anything else. But,
Gotcha.
So for that reason, you're probably more likely to see sows and young boars in earlier times of the afternoon. And I've seen that where a sow will come out onto a beach and feed between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock, and then she disappears. And at 7:15, a 9.5 or 10-foot boar walks out and he feeds. So the sows and young bears get in there and try to get their feed before the big boars come out at night.
Yeah.
That's been more my experience than anything else.
Which I think, that for the time, they said they're more active in the afternoons and evenings. So
one of the great things about a bear bait and with trail cameras, I've never run one video, mainly because a lot of times I'm limited on my trail cams. Either I have too many baits, not enough trail cams.
Yeah.
Or whatever the situation is. But I usually just run photos because I don't know, I'm not going to kill my battery. But you get to see what, you'll see a bear eating, and you're gonna be looking, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's a different bear.
And it's like 2 seconds apart.
It can be seconds or just minutes apart.
Yeah.
And
he ran that last one off.
Right. And sometimes it's shocking what bear ran what bear off too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and to that point, the one thing I like about having video, and you could probably tell us pictures too, but when you're trying to determine the age of a bear, or let's just say you're trying to determine if you're looking at the biggest bear in that area, when it's fascinating to watch these young bears feed at the barrel, because they'll stick their head in, grab a bite, come out, and look around. Look around everywhere. And they're super cautious. They'll sometimes even get up and look behind them and kind of walk around.
Because they know that they're at a site that a preference size bear is going to want if he comes in.
When you watch that big mature bear, he's got his head in the barrel for 5 minutes straight. He doesn't care.
He pops his butt down, falls asleep.
Yeah, he's the dominant guy in that area. He knows nobody's coming in to run him off, and if they do try, good luck. And so when you have that kind of evidence there, I mean, it's so exciting watching those videos. It's my favorite.
Yes.
We're coming up on my least favorite part of the year, which is March, which is because I get bear fever, and then I have to wait until
big time.
And then
I'm looking at pictures on my phone right now. Look at that. There you go. You got a big old boar just laying there.
Yeah, he knows he's the biggest thing in the woods.
Yep. So that pretty much.
Yeah, that pretty well wraps up bear judging and differences. And if you have a way of determining size or boar versus sow that we didn't cover that you think is a great way to distinguish, please write us in at the Northern Hunter on our website. Write us a message, and we'll be happy to revisit this.
Oh yeah,
bears are without a doubt our collective favorite topic to discuss, and it's probably the most popular subject for listeners. So if you have something to contribute, we'd be happy to talk about it and discuss it.
And if you have any questions in addition to what we were talking about, maybe you want some clarification, do the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
But we're here to help. So now that we've kind of gone through where to find where you hunt.
Yep.
And the rules pertaining to that area. We've covered pretty much every species that's going to have any kind of specific regs to it. There are others, but I mean, those are just such a minute area. You've got blacktails and muskox and things like that. But we're not going to dive off into all of those.
Those are pretty simple.
Yeah, they're pretty simple. And again, the regulations have diagrams for all of that. So
Black-tailed deer are just bucks and does. That's about the only differentiation.
Yeah, and if you're used to looking at whitetails, it's the exact same thing.
They either have antlers or they don't.
Yeah, pretty much. But so now we're going to move into methods of take.
Yeah.
What's allowed and what's not allowed. You've got, Alaska, there's been a lot of people that have tried a lot of things because of that.
Yep.
There's the saying that if there's a sign, it's because somebody did it.
Yep.
And the same thing, if there's a rule, it's because somebody did it. So, but there are some, we're not going to touch on all of them. There's an entire segment. If you can pull that up actually and pull up the page that it's on, we'll reference that. But, when you're coming up to Alaska, you've got to realize Alaska is not, not much like a lot of other states in some of the leniencies and some of the, the rules and regs. There's things that are allowed in other states that aren't allowed here, and some of them may surprise you. So we're going to touch on the big ones. And I have it pulled up on my phone. I can find the page number for you.
I think it's page 20. Weapons restricted.
Yeah, it should be actually the next page up as well. It should cover some of them as well. But yeah, so if you go to, let's see, look pretty early on in the regs book, looks like the late teens into the early 20s as far as the pages go. You're going to find specifics on what you can and can't do, specifics on what kind of weapon you can use and what kind of methods you can use to take this game. So I've got a couple written down here, but do you guys have any big ones that have stuck out to you guys over the years that you'd want to touch on pretty immediately?
I mean, not necessarily. I've only ever hunted with either a bow or a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
I've never hunted with a spear, never hunted with a crossbow, never hunted with a muzzle loader. I know there are some muzzle loader specific hunt opportunities that you can get.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you go over the requirements for a bow?
Yeah,
in Alaska,
so a bow, and this is on page, what page are we on here? Scroll down a little bit. Page 20. On the left-hand column, it's archery, bow and arrow. In an area specifically restricted to bow and arrow only, you may not hunt with a crossbow. You may not hunt with a bow designed to shoot more than one arrow at a time. You may not hunt with expanding gas arrows. You may not hunt using poisons or substances that temporarily incapacitate wildlife. And then under equipment, you may not hunt big game with the bow unless the bow is at least 40 pounds peak draw weight when hunting black bear, Dall sheep, caribou, Sika black-tailed deer, wolf, and wolverine. Or 50 pounds peak draw weight when hunting bison, brown/grizzly bear, elk, moose, mountain goat, and muskox. You may not hunt big game unless the arrow is at least 20 inches in overall length, tipped with a broadhead, and at least 300 grains in total weight. Or unless the broadhead is a fixed, replaceable, or mechanical retractable blade type and not barbed. So 40 pounds for a lot of species, and then 50 pounds for bison, brown grizzly bears, elk, moose, mountain goat, and muskox.
The bigger, tougher, dangerous animals.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can shoot black bear with a bow that is at least 40 pounds. So, for female archers or young, juvenile.
youth hunts, things like that.
Exactly. Youth bow hunting. And then the arrow restriction, 20 inches in overall length, tipped with a broadhead, and at least 300 grains in total weight. That's pretty easily accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Over 300 grains is going to be the case if you have any adult draw length.
Yeah,
your arrow is going to be over 20 inches. The average draw length of an archer, the overall average is 28 inches. That's kind of the mean average between male and female shooters.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the overall length uncut shaft is 32, and you can cut that down or leave it at full length if you're like me and you have a ultra long albatross draw length.
Do you know mine's 32 and 3/4?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. My draw length with a recurve is 31 and 3/4.
Yeah, I have 5 bows I can buy. That's it.
Yep, exactly. And as far as broadheads go, fixed blade, replaceable, mechanical, retractable blade, but not barbed.
Mm-hmm.
So it cannot have a barbed construction. And there are broadheads on the market that are barbed that are not legal to use in Alaska. So just make sure that you're covered under that. But I mentioned earlier that I shot my first black bear with a recurve. I grew up shooting a trad bow all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I still shoot a recurve. I haven't shot anything with a recurve since that black bear.
Yep.
Not because it didn't work. It walked 10 yards and tipped over bleeding like a tap.
Yep.
It works awesome. And out of that recurve at the time, I was shooting 53 pounds of draw weight, and my arrow weight was like 750 grains. With a 2-blade broadhead, fixed blade, 2-blade with 2 bleeder blades on it, and it cut a monstrous hole through that black bear and stuck in a root behind it, and just blew right through it. And like I said, the bear walked 10 yards, or stumbled 10 yards and tipped over dead.
Yeah.
There was blood everywhere. The best blood trails I've ever gotten with bears, by the way, as a caveat, have been with archery equipment.
Yeah.
And my compound that I shoot now is 70 pounds, and my overall arrow weight, I believe, is over 600 grains.
Mm-hmm.
And I shoot 3-blade fixed G5 Montec broadheads.
Yep.
Now, this last year, I switched to the M3, which is basically the same thing except no vents.
Okay.
It's just a solid piece of steel. So it's non-expanding. I think that fixed blade broadheads are the way to go. That's a whole other tangent.
Yep.
Cut on contact, fixed blade, heavy arrow, and you'll kill your game as long as you don't, shoot it in the shoulder.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's kind of the summary of the archery.
I want to touch on one more thing with
requirements.
that, and that is the bow hunter education
Yes.
required. There's one instance it's not required in, so I'll go ahead and mention that. If you were born before January 1st, 1986, and are not hunting in an archery-specific hunt, you don't have to have your bow hunter's education.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are hunting an archery-only hunt for big game, or you're, not old.
Hey, that was 4 years before I was born.
Yeah, well, James, you're old. Then you do need your bow hunter's education, which is a
course through the Department of Fish and Game, and you get a little card that certifies that you've gone through bow hunter's ed.
Through COVID, I think they changed the way that looks a little bit. I know that there is a physical class you can go take. I don't know if it's required.
During COVID,
it may have come back.
During COVID, they did away with the in-person field day and education, which I think is complete garbage.
Yeah,
you still had to do a shoot though.
No,
they did away with all
you had to do was pass a test online.
Yep. Really?
And I know some people that are 100% incompetent with a bow that use that time frame to log online and get their bow hunter's ed, and they were nowhere near competent. And I highly doubt that they would have been able to even pass the 28-yard course. And they got their bow hunter's ed, and it was complete nonsense. It just completely voids the entire purpose of having bow hunter's ed to begin with.
Okay, so
I went on a whole rant there.
Very passionate.
I'm going to piggyback on that topic.
The whole point of bow hunter's ed is ensuring efficacy with bow hunters.
I 100% agree. Let me piggyback off that topic. The bow hunter's education course in Fairbanks.
Yes.
I do not know if it's still run by the same people. I hope you at least have to do a shoot now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I did that education when I don't remember how old I was, but I was right at, growth spurt in my teens. And I had been shooting a youth-sized bow that I still had, and my dad's thought was, "Well, here, shoot this, get the course, and we'll upgrade you to a bigger full-size bow." But because I have longer arms, all this stuff, and I'm shooting this youth-sized bow, I had a really hard time shooting straight with it. So I went and did that course. When I did the shoot, I didn't pass the first time. Now, if you don't pass the first time, it's a really easy course.
Yeah.
If you don't pass the first time, sorry, you failed. But they said, no, well, you're shoot at the practice target a little bit and then try again. And then I did, and then I passed fine. But, and then, I think it may have even been that day, he got out the other bow he had for me. We set it up, and I started shooting that bow, and immediately I was better.
Yeah.
The difference was size. And so
right.
It wasn't an issue for me, but there was somebody else there who couldn't hit the 2-foot by 2-foot target at 20 yards.
Yeah.
And that's the practice target.
Yeah.
And she's burying broadheads and field points into the wood and losing arrows.
Yeah.
And they're letting her practice to try to take the course.
Yeah. When I passed that course when I was a young teenager, I guess I was probably 16 when I shot that. I wasn't too young. We had just moved back from overseas not too long prior to that. I shot that course with a recurve, and I passed it my first time.
At that point, I had never shot a compound in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was shooting my recurve every single day. I'd been shooting every day since I was a little kid.
Yep.
I was obsessed with shooting my recurve, and I was good with it,
Right.
out to 30, 40 yards. And not that I would shoot most big game with a recurve of 50 pounds, much past 30 yards.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, that I think the longest shot on that course was 28 yards.
It is.
Yeah.
And like I said, not a single shot was not in a kill zone on the animal.
Yeah.
And I passed it on my first try. And there were people with compounds, like Mariah said, that shot the course, failed, and the instructor said, well, you can just try it again. And they took them back through, and some of them it took 2 or 3 times with
Right.
a compound
Mm.
to pass the course.
Yeah.
That is not an ethical level for a bow hunter to be out there shooting at game.
Yep.
We cannot stress this enough. If you're a bow hunter, you are.
If you want to be a bow
you
hunter.
are
Yeah.
imposing a tremendous amount of physical and psychological stress in your hunting scenario.
Mm.
Shooting big game with a rifle is not all that easy, but it's a whole lot easier than getting under 60 yards with a
Mhm.
bow.
Yeah.
Okay, even with a compound, you're sub 100 most of the time.
Should be.
Most
I mean,
people,
most people are sub 50s.
most people
Yeah.
are sub 50 or 60 yards,
Yeah.
even with a compound.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I could not believe the number of people, even adults, that shot that course with me as a teenager with a recurve that didn't pass the course.
Mm.
And the instructor just waved them on back through.
Yeah.
If you're a bow hunter and you don't pass that course and then they let you reshoot it and you pass it, you ought not to let yourself hunt until you know without a shadow of a doubt that you
Yeah.
could make that shot in the field.
Yep.
With a bow hunter especially, being ethical is more important, and having the self-control to know, look, if that moose steps out at 70 yards and you can only shoot out to 50 consistently, and here's a great illustration. If you can't put 3 arrows in a paper plate at whatever distance your max range is, that's
Yep.
your
Mhm.
cutoff.
Yep.
And that stands.
Yeah.
That's with a recurve, that's with a
Yep.
compound. So
And-
if you can stretch out to 70 with a compound and put 3 arrows in a
Yeah.
pie plate size, then that's great. That's your effective
I didn't
distance.
shoot my bow for a couple of years because I was building a house and all these kinds of things. And I really regret that
Yeah.
because growing up, I shot so much
It slips,
that I
doesn't
could
it?
pick my bow up and go hunting.
Yeah.
And as long as nothing had messed up with the bow,
Yeah.
I never had an issue. I could
Yeah.
always hit what I was aiming at. It was never a problem. But when I didn't shoot it for a couple of years,
Mhm.
pick it back up. I started shooting this past fall more, getting proficient again, had a newer bow, setting up sights. So there's all that too. It was a
Mhm.
different bow.
Yeah.
But when I'm practicing, I'm not practicing to hit a paper plate.
Right.
If I'm bigger than a 4 or 5 inch group,
Oh, you feel like crap.
I feel, I step up closer. I start shooting
Yeah.
closer again. Okay, I need to get I need to get everything that I'm doing. I need to be making sure everything I'm doing is perfect
Yeah.
at a closer range.
Right.
So I can maintain that small group,
Right.
and then I step out 10 yards,
Right.
add 10 yards, add
Right.
10
Yeah.
yards, and I was taking my time, so I didn't stress my muscles too much, but, and I don't mean, it sounded weird to say it that way, but so that I don't, get so much fatigue,
yeah,
because
right,
once you get a lot of fatigue, if you're practicing,
Develops bad form.
yeah. So, I was taking my time, walking slowly, just so that I wasn't getting a heart rate too elevated or anything,
Right.
and working
Yeah.
on bad
Right.
form. And I was working, I started at 20, 30, piece of cake, 40,
Right.
50. And at 50, I'd be like, man, I just whiffed that shot. And yeah, it was within a paper plate,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but
But it's just like
The-
with a rifle, you have the people that shoot a paper plate at 100 yards and think they're
Right.
good, or there's the people like us that shoot
Balls.
1-inch groups or less
Yeah.
at 100 yards.
Preferably
Right.
a whole lot less.
And if it is a
Yeah.
1-inch group, we start thinking, wow, well, can we fix that?
Right.
You know,
Right.
like that, it's that same thing when you're dealing with an arrow.
A good thing to look at with a traditional bow is if you can shoot a couple inch group at whatever distance that your maximum distance is. Once your group grows beyond 2 or 3 inches, at least for me anyway, this is the standard that I hold myself to. If I can't shoot a 3-inch group or less at whatever distance, then
Yep.
I'm too far away.
Yep.
And archery is a maintain skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't keep up on it, if you don't keep your form good, if you don't have the discipline to do it all the time, it does slip. You
Yep.
do lose that skill. Your effective distance gets
Right,
a whole
yeah.
lot shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And with a compound, and like I said, I didn't buy a compound until I was in my adult years. And once I did, I thought, wow, this is the whole new level of precision archery.
Mhm.
And there is zero reason why you cannot shoot under 2-inch groups with a compound
Yeah.
at whatever your effective distance is. There is zero excuse for that, in my opinion. And this is coming from someone that grew up shooting a trad bow.
Right.
So all the mechanics are still there. The push-pull, the follow-through, the back tension, whatever you want to call it. All of those skills were there because I shot a recurve, and all of those mistakes are magnified with a trad bow.
Yeah.
With a compound, it's easy.
The easiest
Those things are a whole lot easier to do.
So the easiest thing to
and-
mess up between those two. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
But the easiest thing to mess up, if you're shooting a trad bow a lot, you start shooting a compound, there's a tendency, because all of a sudden you have this wall you're letting off that you don't have with when you let go, that you don't have with a trad bow. And at least that's been when I've shot a trad bow, I've noticed the opposite effect. When I'm shooting a compound, I just let my arm sit there when I let go,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that's what's going to happen to arrow and release. With the trad bow, you've got to maintain the bow
Right.
out there.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I would think there'd be a tendency to pull that, for that to pull left or something, or right, depending on your grip.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll go a lot more into
I'm
the
sure, yeah.
specifics of archery
Yeah.
And maintaining. And for
Yeah.
those of you listening that might be struggling with getting your bow more accurate, I mean, you can look up online. There's a lot of resources for that are kind of scattered right about now. But if you keep an eye out on what we're going to be putting out here in the next several months, we're going to be providing some resources for you guys to be able to figure out your weapon, because just like a rifle, you got to figure out what bullet shoots right. The same thing with a bow. You got to figure out what arrow shoots right. You got to tune it. You got to do all this different stuff. So we'll be putting out some good information as far as that goes. So, but to get back to the do's and don'ts.
Yes.
Do's and don'ts.
So don't hunt with a crossbow during archery season.
Now that's not entirely true
Unless you have a disability permit.
So
like
what
that.
it is it's hunt specific.
Right.
So crossbows, you are allowed to use them. I believe the state does have a disability program for people that aren't able to draw a traditional bow.
Right.
There are hunts that are archery hunts where you can use either one as well, but there are also hunts that do specify bow and arrow only. So it kind of falls back to the whole knowing where you're hunting and the region you're in.
Yes.
So the distinction in the regs on that is, if it says archery and that's all it says under the hunt, you are not allowed to use a crossbow unless you have a disability permit.
Gotcha.
If it says archery or crossbow in the hunt specific, and you're not going to say that very often.
Yeah, very little.
Then you have that option. But if it only says archery, it's not an option.
Yeah.
Like I said, unless you have a disability.
Right.
Now the next big one is, when I've spoken to a lot of people that use this, is muzzle loaders.
Yeah.
Now personally, I've never hunted with a muzzle loader, but there are restrictions as far as the state goes on the use of muzzle loaders in the taking of big game.
Right.
The most prominent ones are that it has to be a 45 caliber or larger projectile.
Right.
And I mean, these things do get massive.
Oh,
I mean, you can shoot big old balls of lead out of these things.
Yeah.
And saboted rounds and all kinds of other stuff, but it has to be at least a 45 caliber or larger. And then the other thing that, people need to pay attention to is that in many muzzle loader restricted hunts, specifically muzzle loader, you're not allowed to use smokeless powder, and you cannot have a scope mounted on that muzzle loader. It has to be traditional iron sights. And that was a rule I didn't even realize that Alaska had until I looked farther into this, because I've never used it. I know certain states do allow you to use those. You see these newer muzzle loaders, which if you could even call them that, they've got, a bolt action basically, where you put a cartridge in there. That's your powder charge. And then you do have to muzzle load the actual projectile. But outside of that, it's basically a bolt gun. And I've seen people talk about taking 500-600 yard shots with a muzzle loader.
Yeah.
And the state of Alaska just doesn't want that on the specific muzzle loader hunts.
Now, to be clear, this is for muzzle loader specific hunt opportunities.
Yes.
For specific muzzle loader tags.
Yes.
If you decide that you want to hunt with a muzzle loader during gun season,
Yes.
you are allowed to put a scope or use an inline with a preloaded charge, whatever you want. But for muzzleloader specific stuff, they don't want you to have a scope. They don't want you to use I think you mentioned smokeless powder.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of the designated hunt. It's like, if you're going to be out there with a weapon that's every bit as capable as a 30-06, like,
then what's
the point of having a special season?
I've never killed anything with a muzzleloader. I did try a few times on a special hunt. Never had the opportunity to take anything, but I have done it, and yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, honestly, for this hunt, you don't need any kind of fancy muzzleloader. You can go down to Sportsman's and buy. I don't know, it used to be $150, $200. You could buy a
You
decent
can get it at
muzzleloader.
Walmart for $200.
Muzzleloaders are cheap.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, if it's all you can afford, it's a great way to start hunting. You know, especially if you're especially if you're hunting over bait.
And it's a really great way to get some good moose permits. At least in our game management unit, there are quite a few muzzleloader moose opportunities. You know, near a road system where they don't want you shooting a high-powered rifle. Even though I hate using that term.
Yeah.
That they let you shoot a muzzleloader because it's more effective, or you know, it's more universally accessible and usable than archery equipment is.
Yep.
So anyway.
So the next big one that I felt was important to touch on was the use of motorized vehicles during the hunt. So we've covered it before, but just to recap on it, there's no shooting on, from, or across a drivable surface.
Right.
So if you are on a road, you cannot, and a caribou runs out right in front of you, you cannot hop out of your truck and from the middle of the lane take a shot at that caribou.
Right.
You're not allowed to do that. If you are on, let's just say, the right side of the road and you see caribou on the left side of the road, you cannot shoot them without crossing the road first.
Right.
Now, you can be not very far off the road. You can be like literally right in the grass off to the side.
You can stand on the shoulder.
But anything that's not drivable, you know, and so and you see that a lot on the 40-mile hunt, unfortunately. You know, guys getting held up for that every year because they're driving along and the caribou jump out right in front of them. But that is a big one to look at. The other is harassing game with motorized vehicles.
Yes, you cannot chase them down.
Whether it's a boat, a plane, a wheeler, a truck, anything like that, you're not allowed to drive animals with those.
Right.
You're not allowed to corral them, herd them in any direction. To my knowledge, I don't know. I don't think that animal drives are out 100%. I think it's just they're out with motorized vehicles. If anyone wants to bring clarity to that, then please do. But to my understanding, if you were to go across a hill and, you know, let's just say the word we used in Ohio was push. You know, you're pushing the deer.
Yep.
Just by walking, then I don't believe that's illegal, but it doesn't really clarify one way or another.
Right.
The other is shooting from any motorized driven vehicle. So that's a boat, a plane, a helicopter. Actually, helicopters are a whole other segment. But the specific rule is that you are not allowed to shoot from any motor-driven vehicle until the progress from that motor power has ceased.
And in some units, you cannot shoot from a boat, even if it's not under power.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's
You have to be on land.
on land. Yep. So you know, and you do hear of a lot of guys moose hunting out of a boat.
Yep.
You know, and whatnot. And so the way that you would do that, if you're not familiar, is you would motor up to wherever you're trying to go, and then you would drift from there. If you are motoring, and let's just say you're on a lake or something like that, right? You're
believe
allowed
all
to.
of your forward momentum from the motor has to be stopped.
That's what I'm getting at. Is
Right.
if you're on a lake, let's say you're not on a stream that has a current, but you're on a lake and you're trolling along and you happen to see a moose,
Right.
you have to shut the motor off and actually wait until the boat stops moving from that propulsion of the motor before you can take a shot. Now, if you're just drifting down the river, you know, let's say you have your motor pulled up, and
Or if you're just floating in a raft.
floating in a raft,
Right.
or anything like that, and you
Right.
happen to be moving with the natural current,
Right.
that is okay.
Right.
You're allowed to shoot from that platform, but as long as you are under the power of the motor, all shooting is out.
Right.
So,
And again, as long as you are in an area where it is permissible for you to shoot from a boat.
yeah,
There are
Yep.
areas that you need to research and make sure that you are legal to shoot from a boat or that you're not. And in some cases, if you're coastal bear hunting, you can motor up and get within shooting distance sometimes and, you know, putz your way in quietly. If there's a bear out on the beach, all you might have to do is just get up into the low water and then just step out on your waders and you can shoot from in the water. You cannot shoot from the boat.
Correct. Yeah.
Anyway, next thing.
So, the next biggest thing for all you, I guess, tactical guys out there.
Oh boy. Not me.
There's no machine guns,
Yes.
That's kind of a
no set guns,
Mm,
and no shotguns larger than a 10 gauge.
right.
So that is a standard pretty much across the board, all over the state, no matter what hunt you're going after. Even
That's pretty
bird,
much
I remember, I
self-explanatory.
think.
Yeah.
Even bird has the 10 gauge rule, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest reason for that rule is because the way they used to use set guns.
Yeah.
And large shotguns.
Guns. I have such a, I don't know. I personally, I think that would be kind of cool.
I think
To set up at a bear bait. Can you imagine you set your 44 up in a bear bait, and then as soon as the bear sticks its head in, it's just boom, just walk up and there's a bear right there. Like, part of me thinks that'd be really cool.
Well,
but that is totally
That's not
illegal just for
hunting,
everybody to lose.
No, well, but in set
That's not
hunting,
hunting. That's
Right.
that's trapping.
in set gun,
right.
set gun doesn't necessarily mean you've got a gun set up where if something walks in front of it, it's going to kill it.
I think it's tripwire or something. Is the
No, that's
definition.
not what
No.
set gun means. Set gun is say I mounted a shotgun to the front of my boat,
Yeah.
or I mounted a rifle to my tree stand.
Yeah.
That's a set
No,
in place
that's not
gun.
the definition
Yes.
of a set gun. A set gun is set by a trigger. Because, but by your definition, you wouldn't be able to use a tripod and attach your gun to the tripod either.
But you're still in control of it.
It's
Well, you'd still be in control if it was on your tree stand.
so
Either way, it's
a
illegal.
set gun
yeah.
is set off by a trigger
Huh.
mechanism, whether that's a tripwire, a laser, or whatever you want. You know,
well, so the other one I
Either
want
way.
to touch on just real quick because
Yeah.
it bugs me that they use terminology. Just like high powered rifle bugs you, and it bugs me too.
Yeah.
Machine gun bugs me
yeah.
because to me a machine gun is it's a Ma Deuce, it's a 50 cal or it's a 30 cal. It's something set up on a tripod that you pull the trigger and it doesn't stop firing for a long time, right?
Yeah.
But obviously they mean anything fully automatic.
Fully automatic.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, at least up here in Alaska, it's not that hard to get your hands on something fully automatic legally. Legally, and I'm serious. It's
Right.
legally to
Yeah.
have, so you're not supposed to use a fully automatic. So I don't know, if you were going to take say you had a fully automatic 300 blackout AR, would you be allowed to hunt with that?
Dalton's cringing right
I
now.
know, right? Would you be able to hunt with that on the single fire mode?
Yes, because it's not a machine gun at that point. Now, trying to explain that to
You
the game
better
warden,
hope not.
when the
that a
game warden,
warden-
when the game warden comes up and says, "Hey, why?"
right.
Like it's kind of like, should you have the blocker or the whatever they call that in your shotgun?
Just make sure
should
the
you-
full auto fire mode isn't like
Just scratch it out a
Scratch-
little bit.
Oh no, officer! It's just my safety.
Right.
Now, to bounce off something
Oh,
you had
boy.
said that actually wasn't even on my list, but I remembered it, is that you cannot hunt with a 50 cal in Alaska. There actually is no there's no bullet in the 50 cals that the state sees approved for use on big game.
What?
Yep.
Where's this listed?
I don't know where it is on here. I just know that. for
What
a
about
fact.
muzzle loaders?
There's also no, that doesn't count. I'm talking about like the
Wait, because muzzleloaders you can do a lot bigger than 50.
yeah, you can do like 56 cal.
I can't shoot a 500 Jeffries.
The designation, I believe the designation is bigger than 50 caliber.
Yeah.
What?
Because
You can't shoot with anything
because
bigger
it
than
has to
50
be an
caliber.
expanding bullet, and most of them in that range are not expanding bullets.
Now,
It does not
So-
have to be an expanding bullet. What if guys shoot solids?
I don't know. Ask the regs.
That doesn't. I don't. I've never heard
But
of
the
this
other
before.
thing I was going to say, and this is actually more what I was leading to, the 50 cal thing was more of a thought at the top of my head, is there is a weight restriction on guns that you can hunt with, and that is, I believe, 20 pounds.
Okay.
You cannot hunt with a rifle over 20 pounds. So if you do have a very large, range style, 2-mile gun, you're not allowed to go out there.
I've never
And-
heard of either one of those.
I haven't either.
So-
Do you have anywhere to direct us to?
I'll find it in a little bit. This is officially our longest
A
episode here.
50 caliber
So-
restriction.
So I will find it and I will bring it into the next episode.
I
But
want to find it right now.
Yeah, I'm.
so the other big thing I wanted to bring up is no laser sights, no night vision, no infrared, no drones, and no radios.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes two-way radios that you might use when you're talking. Now you're allowed to use these when you are communicating as you're going around.
Yeah.
The specifics on it is to take a specific animal.
Okay.
That's how the regs breaks it down, is you're not allowed to use two-way communication to take a specific animal. You can use two-way communication in the field, but it carries the same rules as flying does. So if you were to use a radio, and let's say you're talking to your buddy or you're trying to get back to somebody in base camp about a specific animal, you have to wait till 3 a.m. the next following day in order to go out and actually pursue that animal. So you guys are really obsessed with that.
Oh, dude,
yeah.
I am heavily into this now. So I just saw something that said that it is completely legal to use whatever caliber for hunting. That 50 calibers are legal, not whatever caliber you want, obviously.
No, I could be totally wrong on that. That's just something I have understood that to be the rule for years. And so if that was something I was told in misinformation, then I apologize for bringing that.
I've never seen that.
But I have heard that you're not. I heard at one time that you're not supposed to hunt with anything bigger than a 50 cal.
Okay.
But that doesn't make sense to me either.
And that may have been what started this whole thing.
So you can't hunt with a 600 nitro?
I guess that would be a good question.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. Why wouldn't you let me take that to go hunt brown bears?
Yeah, that doesn't. And I'm not. I can't say this on the air, but okay.
So
this is something we're gonna come back to.
Hold on. I did think in one hand, I might be thinking specifically of the BMG. I'm not sure. I don't know. Don't take that for any kind of truth. I guess.
BMG would be an amazing moose rifle.
It would be an amazing. You never even have to leave your house.
Yeah, if you're on a wheeler hunt and you park and set it up on a table, yeah.
No, and again, that might have been just something that I heard. So maybe I'm just bringing
so right
hearsay to
here.
the platform.
If you Google, is the 50 caliber legal to hunt in Alaska? There is a state law site, Giffords.org, that just state law stuff. It says last updated September 15th, 2021, Alaska has no law restricting 50 caliber rifles. Now, I don't know that I totally trust whatever this site is, but it is a law center, something to that effect.
Yeah.
I have never heard of that before.
So, and the reason it was explained to me, and again, this is just something somebody told me that I've always just taken for truth, is, and I guess I should have looked it up before.
I've never heard of the
podcast,
20-pound rifle thing either.
Oh, really?
That I've never heard of that before.
That's I've always taken that for truth too. Now the reason is that with they do specify expanding bullets, I believe, in the taking of big game. For your hunting bullet, you're allowed to use solids as a backup shot.
What?
But your initial shot, I believe, does have to be an expanding bullet.
So I really don't. I can't see that being true because what about the guy shooting a 45-70 with a hard cast bullet?
Which is far more effective on a lot of game than an expanding bullet that's going to fall flat on its face.
People hunt with hard casts all the time.
I'm on Fish and Game's website right now under a firearms and ammunition, and this is specifically saying, hey, select a quality bullet. They say big magnums not needed. We might disagree with that, rifle weight reduces recoil, recommended type of action, cartridge selection. There's nothing here that lists that you can't use anything this big, it has to be at least this big, or it can't be that big. I don't see that anywhere in here.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking through. There's a pamphlet on hunting in Alaska provided by Fish and Game. There's weapon recommendations, but I don't see anything about maximum caliber or bullet restrictions.
This guy is a little overkill here. Somebody said, would a 50 BMG be overkill for hunting bears? And he says, no, it would be underkill. You need at least a 20 millimeter.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I don't see anything about that. I'm going to call Fish and Game tomorrow.
Sure, yeah.
And talk to somebody about that.
Maybe we can bring this up next week.
So back on the technology thing. So laser sights, out. Night vision, out. Yep. Infrared, out. Can't use drones. And two-way radios carry the same limitations as an airplane. Just like you can't hunt the same day you fly in. You can't hunt a specific animal the same day that you have used a two-way communication device to talk about that animal.
You have to wait till 3 a.m.
the following day.
Right.
Now, as far as attractants go, Alaska's different than a lot of areas that might be in the lower 48 somewhere. There's no salt licks allowed at all.
Right.
You can no chemicals and deer urine. So urine from any species from the deer family that includes moose,
caribou, black-tailed deer,
elk, anything like that.
The whole gambit
is out. Right. Cannot use urine as an attractant. Now, there are attractants that are kind of based around this. I have to look into them before I bring them up as far as how the legality of that works. I don't know, but if you see an attractant for moose urine and it is utilizing actual urine, you're not allowed to use it. Now, the exception to that is for lures. Now,
Right.
you can use
for like trapping.
for trapping or even bear baiting, things like that, like we were talking about. You obviously use a bunch of different scent lures. So that would be the one exception. And I believe that there are special permits you can get to use certain lures in certain areas. But again, that's not going to be the typical, the typical.
And for the sake of big game hunting is
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yep.
You cannot use animal urine.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you cannot use cervid urine.
Right. Yeah. Deer family. That's what that is.
So
That's
yeah,
the deer family.
right, which is a deer family.
So-
So that that doesn't count bears, obviously. But it actually says using or being in immediate possession of urine from any species of the deer
Oh, interesting.
family,
Yeah.
including scent lures.
Yep. So the next one is electronic calls, actually, kind of falling back to the technology. You are legally allowed to use electronic calls for the taking of any big game species outside of moose.
Mhm.
I don't fully understand why that is.
Wait a minute.
It's pretty easy to use.
Wait a minute. Go back and read that again.
You are allowed to use electronic calls. The use of electronic calls is allowed in the taking of big game for every species other than moose.
Okay.
So you can't go out there and I know for a fact that Fox Pro has moose calls on their
Right.
their
Mine
predator
does.
collars,
Mine does.
but you're not allowed to use it.
Right.
Yeah, and
I would never use an electronic collar for moose anyway, but
I
It
wouldn't
makes
either.
sense
But for
to
somebody
me.
coming up here to hunt for the first time,
right.
You know,
The-
maybe
the-
doing a DIY hunt.
Right.
You know, you do have to do vocalized calls.
Yes.
From your own voice. You are not allowed. You know, you can use the call for wolf howling if you
Mhm.
don't know how to howl like a wolf.
Try
you
to
can
call
use
in
it for
bears. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and what you can even use, and I've heard this talked about before, is using like a moose calf in distress.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're bear hunting, because that's one thing they're looking for. That is totally allowed. But as far as actually like a bull cow or a bull call or a cow call or anything like that, when you're moose hunting, electronic calls are out.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So, and then to circle back to, I think that's really the big ones that people need to look for when they're coming out for a hunt. Outside of that, you know, we touched on that residents need a locking tag for both black bears and brown bears, and
Yeah.
in some instances it says here that sometimes you might not even need just your locking tag and your license, but are also required to have a harvest ticket and a locking tag and your license.
Mm-hmm.
So that again will be
Always
regional.
the license, but
Would
yes.
be, well, always the license, yes, but
Right.
that would be regional to the specific place you plan on hunting. If you're going with a guide, they should give you the heads up on that. But
Right.
Mhm.
I just wanted to touch on a couple of points here just while we're going. You may not hunt moose with the use of electronic calls. You may not hunt sheep, mountain goat, or muskox using domestic goats or domestic sheep as pack animals.
oh,
And you may not hunt big game with the aid or use of a dog, except dogs may be used to hunt black bears under a permit issued by ADF&G. A single leashed dog may be used in conjunction with tracking and dispatching a wounded big game animal. So that's self-explanatory. I just wanted to
Yep.
hit on those items.
so if you're used to running dogs, takes a little bit more permitting to do that.
Yeah, and
So-
good luck with the terrain up here.
Yeah, right.
Knock yourself out. I think
So
that's
other than that, I think we
that's
can circle back to
pretty much the-
bears. Pretty
the
much
heavy
is the main
hitters.
topic of this one. So, what bear is too young to legally shoot?
any okay, the taking of cubs is strictly prohibited.
Yep.
And the taking of any sow with any cubs
Mhm.
with it,
Mhm.
accompanied by cubs, period.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if they're 2 years old, doesn't matter if they're full grown bears, if they're still with ma, they're illegal.
Yep.
Period.
Cannot shoot the sow either.
No grace.
Yep.
So
Except in predator control areas.
correct. It has to be a
In a special,
specifically
specific.
I think there's only one unit that allows that,
It
right?
it can
Does it change per year?
to
Yeah,
year
okay.
depending
Yeah,
on
gotcha.
what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
on how
And
they were
for-
trying to manage that particular
And for some of the
subunit.
older, like the older style hunting and subsistence hunting, there are units where it's allowed if in like little areas in certain times of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
They're very
yeah.
specific small things that I don't
But
think.
it will say so in the regs if
Yeah.
you can. If it does not say anything about that, then the taking of any sow with cubs or any cubs with a sow
Right.
are 100% off limits.
Yep.
I've heard some people try to feed you a line about, well, if the sow comes in and she has, 2 3-year-old cubs or 2 2-year-old cubs,
Yep.
and they're going to be kicked off soon anyway, you can still shoot the sow or you can shoot one of the cubs. That is completely wrong.
Yep.
If
Yep.
there is a cub with a sow, both of them are off limits, period.
Yeah.
No exceptions, no grace. And if you shoot either one of those and the troopers find out, you're in for a whole lot of trouble.
Yep.
Yeah.
So shoot the ones that are by themselves. And on that note, when you're at a bait site or when you're hunting bears in general, if you see a bear that's anywhere near the brush, that has any restricted visibility around it, you need to be careful and watch for cubs.
Yep.
Because I have seen it more times than I can count, where I see a single bear, whether it's on a hillside or at a bear bait, and they come in or they come out into view in the spotter. And you're watching them, and all of a sudden, out pops a little basketball-sized cub.
Yep.
Well, if you would have shot it 10 minutes ago when it first stepped out into your bait, or when it stepped out into that clearing, you'd have just shot an illegal bear.
Yep.
So make sure there's no cubs because they don't always just run together.
And it can sometimes take even longer than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it take up to 20,
Absolutely.
I had an interesting situation this past spring in a bear bait. It was a grizzly sound cubs, an area where I couldn't be hunting grizzlies, but we were sitting there, so we decided to watch them.
Yeah.
And the sow came in, she was chowing down. And then I hear some more, sticks breaking and stuff coming in. And grizzlies make a ton of noise coming in compared to black bears most of the time.
Yeah. You get that.
You hear that, you hear the breathing, you hear the pop in their teeth, or you just hear them. If they don't know you're there, they won't be popping their teeth.
Right.
Sticks breaking and stuff. Black bears will tiptoe in like a princess, and you have no idea they're
They'll
there.
slip in and slip out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, she was sitting there just chowing down. You can hear the dog food crunching between her teeth, and I hear another bear coming in. And I look over and I see it on my left, and I can see was a bit lighter of a bear, and it's coming in, and she's looking at it, and she keeps looking up and looking at it, and then I hear more noise up on the hill, and she's looking up that direction. I'm on a hillside, and anyway, she's looking up that way, and then I kind of see 2 bears, one at different times than the others, up above where she was at and eating. And she's looking at them. She doesn't seem alarmed. She just seems very miffed, right? And she looks up, and she finally just all of a sudden was like snap of the finger, just took off after those bears. And I got looking at my game camera, and there'd been a sow with 2 3-year-old cubs. I almost wouldn't even classify them as cubs because they were so big. They were almost as big as she was, but she was trying to chase them off.
Yeah.
Right.
Trying to keep them away.
She was trying to get rid of them.
Right.
And they wanted to come eat. And so when she ran off to chase them out. I mean, she ran off, and you heard the snarling and the sticks breaking. It went crazy for a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean, for those listening, I mean,
that'd be a gray area. You
always think about
if she's trying to chase them off.
If they're successfully kicked, that would, complete separation. But what I was getting at is, everybody in their head, they have this image of like a mama bear with these little itty bitty, like you said, basketball sized cubs.
Right.
Which
we see plenty of.
If you see a sow that has 3-year-old cubs with them,
that's a whole herd of bears.
That is a herd of bears. Yeah. And that is something
I've got a
that's
funny
fun to
story.
think about.
I've got a funny story about that. I read a book a couple of years ago about a guy that hunted up here a bunch. He's a resident of South Central, and he was out on the peninsula. I'll just be vague about it. And he was by himself, and he walked up a river a little ways. This was in the spring, and he found a little tree to sit behind out in the middle of the gravel bar. He said he had about 50 yards wide on the gravel bar that he could see up and down the river each way, where it dumped out into the ocean. And he sat there and blew on his predator call for a while and was trying to just call a bear out and just get one to stick its head out. He knew it was a high density bear area, and he had flown in there. He was by himself.
Yep.
And he said, I called for, 5-10 minutes, whatever it was, for a little bit. Nothing had stepped out. I didn't think anything was going to come in from any kind of distance, so I just kind of gave up, and I just sat there for a bit just watching. He said, and I fell asleep. And I woke up to the sound of a growl, and up the sandbar, or up the gravel bar, is coming a sow and 3 adult cubs on a full charge. He said the wind was bad. They could smell me, and they'd heard the predator caller, and they were coming in. So he stood up with his rifle. He had a 300 Win Mag, and which is just short caveat, not what I'd want to stop a brown bear with, especially 4 of them. And he waved his arms and tried to make some noise, and they did not turn. They were coming in hot. So he shot one. He shot the biggest one that he thought, and they stopped. The one dropped, and he racked the bolt, and another one took off charging at him again. Shot the other one. And then the last 2 that he assumed were both two of the 3 cubs took off and veered off and left. So sows and cubs, especially sows with adult cubs, you do not want to put yourself in a situation where you're intruding their bubble. We'll just put it that way. You need to give them a wide berth, let them know you're there, try to chase them off. If you're at a bear bait and a grizzly sow comes in with a few cubs that are adults, or if you're at a bear bait and you can't shoot grizzlies over a bait, man, run them things off. Clap your hands, make some noise, run them out of there, because they'll throw every black bear in the zip code away from your bait.
And they'll eat your food faster than you can keep it.
You'll literally go through 100 pounds a day if you feed them
it's like
that
feeding
much.
teenagers.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, that being said, do not mess with sows with adult cubs. And black bears, too, but especially grizzlies. Grizzly sows are just extremely cantankerous.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
I'm sure the DLP laws have some leniency as far as that's concerned, especially since the sows with cubs are probably the most likely.
He had to turn them both in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Fish and Game took both of them.
Yeah.
Because it was a sow with cubs.
And I know that in DLP in general, they take... They seize the animal, and the hide, I believe, actually goes up for auction. At the end of the year.
For the most part. Yep.
Yeah. So right. But I don't think you've got to worry about the legalities of a sow with cub in that situation.
No, if it's a DLP, man, and for our listeners, DLP is defensive life and property.
Yep.
If you're in a dangerous situation where the bear is going to get you or it's coming at you on a charge, then man, open it up, blast it, put it down.
Yep.
That's use enough gun.
All right. Well, you guys think we covered it?
I think we've about beat this horse to death.
Yeah. I mean, this is our longest episode yet.
Yeah. So, and again, give us some feedback on the length of the episodes you guys like. I mean, we can go longer if you like, or we can try to cut them back. No guarantees. We just like talking. So
this is great. I think this is one of our best content episodes yet. I've loved every minute of this. Yeah. Like I said, I love bears, so this has been easy.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys. The only final thought I have really is that we'll address the regs thing in a future housekeeping topic on those ones. So
on the caliber stuff,
on the hearsay.
I'm going to call Fish and Game and talk to them about it because I want to know.
Well, yeah, I do too. So
on that note,
hang in on those ones.
On that note, while you're on your bear hunt,
you
need to have your Stealthy Hunter rifle cover.
I was going to go for the glassing pad.
And the glassing pad.
Yeah.
Because when you're sitting on a gravel bar, predator calling for grizzly bears.
Or when you're sitting in your tree stand and that stupid seat that came with that cheap tree stand makes your butt go numb.
Then use your Stealthy Hunter glassing pad.
Yeah.
Or, protect your rifle and your optics.
Yeah.
Cover up the action.
Yeah.
And
protect your butt, too.
Sport a great rifle cover from Ryan Lampers at Stealthy Hunter.
Yeah.
And when you check out, use the discount code, The Northern Hunter.
No caps,
and you'll
no
get
space.
Yes, no caps, no space, and you will get a discount on your order. That'll help support the show. We appreciate that kickback, and it'll also go to support a great fellow in the industry, a good friend of ours, and Ryan Lampers and his family there that has that company. They also have nutritional products, and sure at this point in the episode you already heard the commercial about it, so we'll leave that at that. But go buy a rifle cover.
All right.
Yeah, and a glassing pad.
And a glassing pad.
And some nutritional supplements.
Yep.
Just do it all.
At a discount.
Yes.
Oh. All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging in on our officially longest episode. If you have any thoughts, any questions, or any commentary, hit us up and go to the website and hit the contact button at thenorthernhunter.com. You can also go to our socials, message us at either one of those, we'll be able to get to it and get out to you.
Yeah, we
Get
will
those
respond
answers.
to you. If you've sent us a message, we haven't responded yet, it's just because we haven't gotten around to you yet.
Yeah.
We've read the message and we'll plan it on at some point.
Yeah,
in the
we're either
future.
looking for more information or we're just all working full-time jobs while trying to do this.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, I appreciate it, and we'll catch you next week.
All right.
Use big guns, kill big bears.